Chapter 212. That Ing Ning, you haven't finished. After sparking with Xiao Huan's gaze, the girl turned her head and said to Li Yi. She had already told Grandpa Sun the complete story of the painted skin. After listening to Ing Ning, Grandpa Sun had another story that others didn't know, which could attract many customers. Grandpa Sun only told the first half of the painted skin twice, but the number of customers in the brothel today was several times more than usual. Although most of them came to listen to the painted skin, they were in a good mood after seeing the song and dance and acrobatics. They didn't receive as much as Grandpa Sun, but they were all in the same brothel, so they received some positive effects. If she could receive so much money every day, she would be able to afford the hairpin that she had been yearning for a long time. Next time you want to listen to it, just climb the wall. Li Yi drank tea while watching the song and dance on the stage. In this kind of occasion and atmosphere, they should be eating melon seeds. Watermelons existed in this world, but he didn't know if they had the habit of eating melon seeds. The girl looked disappointed. Although she didn't like climbing the wall, she had to bear with it for the sake of the new story. After the song and dance ended, and the girls picked up the money on the stage, Li Yi saw the old storyteller walk onto the stage again. At this moment, the atmosphere in the brothel suddenly became lively. Hurry up. Don't talk nonsense. Tell me about the painted skin. If you try to fool me with next time again, don't blame me for being rude. Even Li Yi's expression was slightly startled when he saw the crowd urging him to hurry up. Was the painted skin so popular in this world? At this moment, the old man raised his hand and pressed down. The voices of the crowd immediately stopped. A few men who were still chatting without knowing what was going on were immediately stopped. The atmosphere in the brothel suddenly became quiet. From noise to silence, it only took a breath or two. Feng was still regretting that the young girl on the stage had been replaced by the old man. He was shocked by the sudden silence and asked subconsciously, "What's wrong?" Shua. Dozens of people turned their heads at the same time. This corner suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention. Under Feng's innocent expression, the old man had already begun to speak. Considering that there were new guests, the old man told the story from the beginning. The guests who had heard it before didn't show any impatience, but the expressions of those who heard it for the first time changed from puzzled to focused, and then to pale. Xiao Huan had already heard of painted skin, although this old grandpa was scarier than the son-in-law when he talked about it, but she had already developed an immunity to it, and would not run far away in fear. This old man is quite good at scaring people, Feng said in a low voice while listening. With his personality, he would not be scared by the old man. If a ghost really dared to scare him like this, he would most likely beat the ghost to death again. Having already memorized the entire story, the old man did not stop when he reached the place where he had left off last time. Instead, he continued. Those who had been fooled by him twice immediately felt relieved. This time, they could finally listen to the next part of the story. They threw a lot of money at him. It was raining copper coins on the stage. The wrinkles on the old man's face bloomed like flowers, and he became more attentive in telling the story. Looking at those people throwing money at him, Li Yi was astonished again. It was just telling a ghost story. How could it earn so much money? It seemed that in the other world, when Pu Songling wrote strange stories from a Chinese studio, he was still poor. But here, a storyteller's story had such an outstanding effect? It seemed that he had only exchanged a few pieces of osmanthus cake with a chapter of painted skin. It was a bit of a loss. He turned to look at the girl named Xiaozhu. He didn't expect her to be so smart at such a young age. Feeling Li Yi's gaze on her, the girl cursed in her heart. After today's scene, if she wanted to hear more stories from him in the future, it would no longer be as simple as stealing a few pieces of osmanthus cake from Sister Ruoqing. The story of Ing Ning was only half told. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have asked Grandpa Sun to tell the story at this time. Looking at his expression, he probably regretted telling the story. Such a story could be sold at a high price in Hua City. Li didn't regret it. The money that the old man got was not even as much as the profit from selling a bottle of Rui nectar. He was just curious about the entertainment in this world. These people watched the programs in the brothel, and when they were happy, they would give tips. These tips were the main source of income for the ordinary actors and storytellers. The tips weren't much, and it was only enough for them to make ends meet. Compared to the stars in the future, who could easily earn tens of millions of yuan by participating in a movie, a TV series, or a commercial performance, these seniors were living a miserable life. In any era, the entertainment industry should be relatively easy to make money. However, the entertainment industry in this world obviously had a lot of room for development. In layman's terms, there was still a lot of room for making money. As the weather gradually entered winter, the mosquitoes were almost frozen to death. Young ladies no longer needed it to drive away mosquitoes. In the cold weather, scholars didn't sleep easily either. The business of Rui nectar gradually cooled down. Sometimes only a few bottles were sold in a day. As for strong alcohol, although it was always in short supply, this thing was too wasteful of food and could not be brewed without restrictions. Most of the people in the Jing country were still hovering around the line of food and clothing and did not even have enough to eat. Even Ning Wangfu could not waste food without scruples. If they were targeted by the imperial censors and imperial censors, even Ning Wang would have a headache. Therefore, a few winemaking workshops had been closed recently. The production of Rui nectar was limited, and the supply of hard liquor was limited. Naturally, the daily income was greatly reduced. Of course, he had saved up a lot during this period of time, so he didn't lack money. However, things like buying a house in the prefecture city could only be postponed. As for the soap and perfume that were only for personal use, it was not suitable to be produced in this season. It was necessary to think of new ways to make money. At this moment, he only had this thought. The most important thing now was to recover from his injuries. He once again focused his attention on the old man. The content of his story was slightly different from what he told the young lady. He had probably made some small changes to cater to the audience. It had to be said that this old man was indeed a professional, even though Li Yi already knew the complete story. Listening to the old man's story still made his hair stand on end. This time, the old man didn't play tricks and honestly finished the story. The audience below the stage applauded. Naturally, there was no lack of rewards. When the old man retreated, it took him a lot of time to clean up the rewards on the ground. Li Yi was purely here to kill time. Xiao Huan and Fang accompanied him. The young lady stayed for a while and left. When Li Yi turned his head, he saw the old man walking over with the young lady following behind him. For today's matter, I still have to thank you, young master. These rewards should belong to young master. The old man placed a small cloth bag on the table and said with a smile, "What do you mean?" Li looked at him puzzled. If it wasn't for the painted skin that young master told me, this old man wouldn't have received so many rewards. This money, please don't refuse, young master. The old man explained. He told the story of the painted skin without prior consent from Li Yi. Although it was exchanged by Xiao Zhu with a few pieces of hanging flower cakes, he could only continue the story with peace of mind if Li Yi accepted the money. Yes, young master, please accept it. The young lady also said. In that case, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Li Yi nodded and took the bag. It was filled with heavy copper coins. Seeing that Li Yi accepted it, the old man relaxed. He hesitated and said, "This old man has a presumptuous request." Chapter 213. An unreasonable request meant an unreasonable request. Since he knew the request was unreasonable, why would he bring it up? However, on account of Xiao Zhu and Osmanthus flower cake, Li Yi still smiled and said, "Elder, please speak your mind. It's like this. Young master has also seen that those customers just now all came for painted skin. This old man wants to buy some similar novels from young master. Young master, rest assured, the price will definitely satisfy young master." The old storyteller looked at him and said. Li Yi tilted his head and looked at the young girl standing beside the old man. She must have told this old man these things. When he first told her the story of painted skin, his intention was to tease her more. In the morning in the courtyard, it was because he was really bored and wanted to find someone to talk to. In essence, telling her the story was the same as telling the story to Xiao Huan. But this old man's meaning, just now, was to treat him as the kind of person who specialized in writing scripts. almost equivalent to the scriptwriters of the future. If it was a few months ago, when he was still worrying about his family's lack of food, he might have agreed to this old man. After all, survival was always number one. But now, to sell strange stories from a Chinese studio, for just a few copper coins, even if he didn't say it was unfair to himself, wouldn't it be unfair to Pu Songling? To refuse, he had to be more tactful. He looked at the old man and shook his head, saying, "Haha, this painted skin is something I've heard of by chance. There really aren't any similar stories." The young girl raised her head and looked at him in disbelief. How could there not be any? Where was Legend of the White Snake, Journey to the West, a Chinese ghost story? Could it be that he had made all these up to deceive her? It didn't seem like it. Other than painted skin, there was also the half-finished Ding Ning. The old man's face showed a look of disappointment. He sighed and said, "This old man has disturbed you. If young master has any good stories in the future, this old man will welcome them at any time." He had lived for so long. How could he not know that this young master's words did not match his heart? The girl called Xiaozhu wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything and left with the old man. Fong and Xiaohuan watched the show with relish. Li Yi would occasionally ask Xiaohuan to give him some tips. Even though the show was a little boring for him, it was much better than lying in his room alone. In his heart, he thought that if he had time in the future, he should change the entertainment business here. He had no other purpose but to relieve his boredom. Most of the customers in the brothel had indeed come for the old man's story. After listening to it, many people chose to leave. Li Yi stayed in the brothel for another hour before leaving with Xiaohuan and Fong. When they walked out, a woman walked out from the backstage. When her eyes inadvertently swept over the door, her expression was slightly startled. Sister Ruoqing stopped looking. "They're gone." Xiaozhu stretched out her hand and waved it in front of her eyes, then curled her lips and said, "What happened to him?" Wan Ruoqing muttered to herself as she recalled that when the figure was walking, there was a young girl supporting him. "He's injured," Xiaozhu continued. "In the future when you walk on the road, you must be careful of those vicious dogs that bite people." The girl was still mumbling something, but the pretty face of the woman beside her was a little absent-minded. After a moment, the girl stretched out her hand again and waved it in front of her eyes. "Sister Ruoqing, it's our turn." Walking out of the door of the brothel, and then out of the tile-roofed house, they walked a few steps to reach Rui Lane. When Xiaohuan helped him walk in, Rui and Rui were both in the courtyard. "What is second miss doing?" Fong looked at Lu Rui in the courtyard with some puzzlement, and asked, "Is she practicing martial arts? I've never seen this method before." Seeing this, Li Yi was curious. Previously, Lu Rui said that he was fighting randomly, saying that using softness to overcome hardness, and that there was no martial arts that could move 1,000 caddies with little effort. She advised him to return to the right path as soon as possible, and stop thinking about those unrealistic things all day long. At that time, when he asked her if she wanted to learn from him, Mississippi Lu very bluntly refused. But what was she doing now? Although her mouth said no, her body was still quite honest. Seeing that Li Yi had returned, Rui and Xiaohuan went to the kitchen to cook. Seeing that Li Yi was in no hurry to return to his room, he sat on a chair in the courtyard and looked at her. "Sai, you're not doing this. Experience the feeling of circle. Remember not to use force, relax a little. Only then can you experience the essence of Tai Chi. Come closer, it's too far, I can't see clearly." In the past, it was always Lu Rui who guided him in his practice, and whenever he did something wrong, she would violently correct him. Now that he finally had the chance to be in charge, Li Yi was never tired of correcting her movements. Lu Rui stopped, took a long sword from the side, and pulled it out with a clang. "What are you doing?" Li Yi was shocked. He only corrected a few of her movements. Did she have to pull out the sword? One had to know that at that time, whether it was her words or her movements, they were much more violent than him. Didn't that old Taoist who passed by teach you Tai Chi sword? Lu Rui squinted at him and asked. "No, absolutely not." Although there was a Tai Chi sword tutorial in the library, Li Yi shook his head with a face full of certainty. She didn't want to learn Tai Chi sword. She obviously wanted to find a chance to torture him to vent her anger. Lu Rui glanced at her and put away her sword. Fong ran out of the shop, glanced at Lu Rui, and ran to Li Yi's side and whispered, "Young master, Miss Wan is here." "Miss Wan?" Lu Rui's heart moved, and he immediately looked over. Looking at Fong's guilty look, Li Yi felt depressed. If Miss Wan was here, then so be it. Why did he have to be so quiet? The two of them had a pure relationship, and they didn't have any secret relationship. So why were they afraid of being seen by others? Hearing the footsteps behind him, Lu Rui looked back, and the moment he met the woman's eyes, a trace of amazement flashed through their eyes. "Greetings, madam." Wan Ruoqing walked to Lu Rui's side, smiled and bowed slightly. Although Li Yi had never put on airs in front of her, he was a county lieutenant after all, and his status was much higher than that of a lowly woman like her. She subconsciously regarded the woman in the yard as her wife, and bowed slightly. "Madam?" The expression on Li Yi's face was slightly stunned, and Lu Rui was stunned for a moment. She understood what Li Yi meant, and a trace of red appeared on her pretty face, and she glared at Li Yi fiercely. Li Yi was depressed by her glare, and he couldn't blame himself for this. Mississippi Lu was too unreasonable. Thinking that she had never been reasonable, he sighed, stood up, and said, "Miss Ruoqing, you have mistaken me for someone else. This is actually my wife's sister." "Ah, sorry." Wan Ruoqing was stunned for a moment, and then an awkward expression appeared on her face, and she hurriedly apologized. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Miss Ruoqing, what can I do for you?" The embarrassment on Wan Ruoqing's face had not faded. She paused and said, "You said that you were injured. I came to have a look. It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal." Li Yi said with a smile, "It's good that you're fine. I'll go first." What happened just now made her blush. Seeing that Li Yi was fine, she was also relieved. She hurriedly put down the bamboo basket in her hand. "There's nothing good. These osmanthus cakes, just take it as a small gift from Ruoqing." "Ah." Li Yi still wanted to say something, but after she put down the basket, she hurriedly turned around and left, and no matter how he called her, she would not look back. "I haven't brought the basket back yet." Watching her figure disappear from his sight, Li Yi murmured in a low voice. Lu Rui walked out of the kitchen and looked outside the door in confusion. She walked to him and asked, "Husband, where's that girl? Maybe there's something urgent." "I'll go first." Li Yi spread out his hands helplessly. Lu Rui nodded and did not dwell on this matter anymore. She looked at him and said, "Husband, come in with me." Li Yi thought that she had something to discuss with him, so he followed her into the room. Lu Rui waited for him to come in, and then closed the door. Seeing her action, Li Yi was puzzled. It seemed that the thing to be discussed later was very important. "Husband, take off your clothes first." After Li Yi sat on the bed, his soft voice came to his ears. "Ah." Li Yi looked up at Lu Rui, who was walking towards him, and doubted his ears. Chapter 214. Take off my clothes? Li Yi was stunned and his mind went blank for a moment. Didn't they have something important to discuss? Was it necessary to take off his clothes to discuss something? A man and a woman were alone in a room. A woman closed the door and asked another man to take off his clothes. Anyone would think of something indescribable. This is not good. It was broad daylight and Rui and Xiaohuan were still outside. Couldn't they do it at night? Moreover, with Rui's character, how could she take the initiative? This surprised Li Yi and made him a little happy. Was his virginity of 2 lifetimes going to end today? "If you don't take off your clothes, how can I heal you?" Lu Rui looked at him and explained. "That palm hurt your lungs, and it's not easy to heal. Using true qi to help you clear your meridians can help you recover faster." "I see." Li Yi looked a little disappointed. It turned out that it was just healing. He struggled for so long just now. If she asked for that, should he obey or obey or obey? He had no choice but to obey. She was so good at martial arts and he was injured. He couldn't resist. He could only resist symbolically, and then reluctantly. In the end, he was just thinking too much. He did not know that Junqi could also heal injuries. It was no wonder that the experts in wuxia novels would feel like they were on the brink of death, when they were slashed a few times or struck a few palms. It was as if they would die in the next moment, but they would immediately recover after a few days. It turned out that Junshi could heal themselves, and the effect was thousands of times better than seeing a doctor or taking medicine. This was simply a life-saving bug that defied the natural order. The chances of becoming a martial arts master were already very slim. At the very least, he had to cultivate true qi. He did not ask for anything else. With the healing skills of a priest, his ability to protect himself immediately increased by a lot. Healing wounds was fine. Li Yi began to take off his clothes slowly. He wore a little more winter clothes, and only had a thin shirt on his upper body. When he reached out to untie his belt, Lu Rui's voice came. "Husband." Li Yi looked up at her. "You don't need to take off your clothes." It was not like what was depicted in the TV series, where the two of them sat cross-legged on the bed, one in front of the other, naked, with the latter's hands pressed tightly against the former's back. Hot air rose from their bodies, and red and blue lights flickered alternately. At this moment, the scene in the room was much gentler. Li Yi closed his eyes and lay flat on the bed. He lifted his clothes and revealed the place where he had been hit by Wu Ying's palm. Compared to yesterday, the bruise had already faded a little. Rui's slender and fair palm covered his abdomen. Other than feeling that her hand was abnormally warm, Li Yi did not feel anything else. There was no such thing as a warm current. The television was full of lies. If he had to say what he felt, it would be comfortable, especially when the hand on his abdomen moved slowly. Li Yi opened his eyes and happened to meet her gaze. Time seemed to stop for a moment. Rui's hand paused slightly, and an invisible layer of charming atmosphere spread out. "Cough, I'm a little thirsty." Li Yi coughed dryly, making the atmosphere slightly less awkward. "I'll go get some water." Lu Rui breathed a sigh of relief and quickly walked away. She opened the door and walked out. Looking at her slightly flustered footsteps, Li Yi's heart surged with an indescribable feeling. In his previous life, he had been single for 20 years. Before he transmigrated, he was still worried about his mother forcing him to get married. In the end, in less than 2 days, he got married to someone and had a wife. To be honest, when he was pressured by his mother, it was not that he had never thought of finding someone to marry and spend the rest of his life with. In his previous life, Li Yi was not considered a successful person, but he was not that bad either. The girl he had a crush on for a while got married and had children early. After he passed the age of 20, he did not feel that he had to marry anyone else in this life. He was satisfied as long as he could find someone and live a stable life. If he did not meet that psychopath Wu Ying, his current life was actually considered stable. He had a wife who could satisfy all men's fantasies, a sister-in-law who was unruly and willful, but would not drop the ball at a critical moment, a silly and cute maid who did not have any ideals and liked to listen to stories, and he was surrounded by beauties. He lived an ancient life that many men dreamed of envied. The only strange thing was his relationship with Rui. They were husband and wife in name, but after spending time together, although the distance between them was constantly narrowing, they had never exceeded the state of friendship and love. In any case, compared to other people, his feelings for Rui were the most special. It was impossible to say that he loved her to death, but when he thought of the person who would accompany him for the rest of his life, the first person that appeared in his mind was still her figure. However, at least until now, the relationship between the two had not reached the point where they could do something more intimate. The revolution had not succeeded, and the comrades still had to work hard. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when Li Yi looked down, he found that the bruise on his abdomen was lighter, and the faint pain had lessened. It should be the effect of Rui's touch that woke him up. "Son-in-law, it's time to eat." Not long after he put on his clothes, Xiao Huan knocked on the door and came in. In the next few days, Rui would use her true qi to help him sort out his meridians. She seemed to have gotten used to it, and did not stop like the first time. Of course, Li Yi was a normal man after all. Sometimes he could not control some of his body's normal reactions when she touched his lower abdomen. Every time this happened, the atmosphere would become awkward again. It was unknown what had happened to Rui recently, but the number of times she practiced martial arts was much more than before. Sometimes she would come over and ask Li Yi some questions about Tai Chi. Li Yi could only make it look like Tai Chi. How could he know anything deeper? He just casually threw out the words written in the book that sounded powerful, and it was enough for her to ponder over it for a whole day. As usual, he would go to the brothel to kill time. The old man would recite the painted skin over and over again, and anyone would get tired of it. The number of customers he could attract was decreasing, which was a good thing for Li Yi. It was quieter with fewer people. Every day, after lunch, he would order a cup of tea and sit there for about 2 hours. During this period, the old man gave him money several times and mentioned that he wanted to buy some stories from Li Yi. After he did not get the answers he wanted, he did not speak again. If it was a coincidence, he could occasionally see Ruoqing singing on stage. Sometimes, after she finished singing, she would come over and say a few words to Li Yi. She would take out her poems and let him comment on them. Li Yi had almost digested all the books about poetry in the library. It might be difficult for him to write a good poem, but he had accumulated a lot of knowledge and could give good suggestions most of the time. The girl named Xiaozhu stood behind Ruoqing and looked at them. Sometimes, she would look at them from head to toe, and her eyes would roll around. She looked like a mischievous spirit. She did not understand poetry, and she had never heard of Li Yi's name. She just felt that Sister Ruoqing's friend seemed to be a genius who knew a lot of stories. He was good at everything, but he was too stingy. Chapter 215. Sister Ruoqing. The number of customers here has decreased again these past 2 days. After Li Yi left, the girl named Xiaozhu looked at the sparse customers in the brothel and sighed. As the popularity of the painted skin gradually faded, the customers in the brothel decreased day by day. Now it was almost back to its usual level. According to their original estimations, it should have taken a little longer, but things did not develop as they had expected. In just one day, the story of the painted skin had spread everywhere. Although they were indignant, they couldn't say anything about it. It was all a story. If Grandpa's son said it, others would naturally say it too. For a short story like this, after listening to it once, one could almost repeat it. It was impossible to rely on these stories to earn money for a long time. On one hand, the customers were taken away by other brothels. On the other hand, the story had been told too many times, so it naturally lost its novelty. There were fewer and fewer customers who had not heard of it, and there were no new stories to supplement it. Naturally, there would not be more people who were willing to come. One Ruoqing looked at her sisters who were performing seriously on the stage, but there were not many people watching. She sighed softly, and a trace of helplessness appeared on her face. They were just actors who lived at the bottom of the industry. They were not like those famous actors who depended on high officials and nobles. Every time they performed, they could get a lot of money. They could only survive in this way. Her situation was better. She had some fame in a small circle, and her singing was not bad. She and Xiaozhu did not live a comfortable life, but they could barely get by. However, such a life was not worth looking forward to. Perhaps once they were out of luck, the first thing they would face would be the problem of survival. That Li seems to be very rich, the girl said in a low voice, holding her chin. The shop called Rui Fong next door was very famous in Qing'an Prefecture. It was said that many rich young masters and ladies liked to buy things there. He must not be short of money. It was a pity that Sister Ruoqing never accepted the help of those friends. Otherwise, their lives would be much better. But speaking of which, Sister Ruoqing treated that young master differently from others. Could it be? The girl turned her head to look at her, and her face gradually showed a look of understanding, as if she had discovered something extraordinary. Wasn't the best ending for actors like them to marry such a young man? Although they could not become the official wife, even if they could be a concubine, if they could be treated well by him, it would be an excellent ending. Elder Sister Ruoqing was not only good at singing, she was also talented in poetry. Many scholars had expressed their interest in her, and there was one called Jiang Zi, and who had pursued her relentlessly. However, Elder Sister Ruoqing did not agree. Apparently, her heart belonged to someone else. That young master treats people very kindly, so he probably won't mistreat Elder Sister Ruoqing. However, She had to be careful of that girl, who liked to play with her sword. When she climbed the wall, she saw her practicing her swordsmanship in the courtyard. Such a person was definitely not someone to be trifled with. If elder sister Ruwaching entered his house, she might bully her. That woman was very powerful. Even if she and elder sister Ruwaching joined forces, they might not be her match. In the girl's heart, she began to worry. What are you thinking about? One Ruwaching saw that the girl's expression kept changing. Sometimes she was happy, and sometimes she was worried. She gently tapped her head and asked, "If Sister Ruwaching marries Lee, I'm afraid she has to be careful of that." The girl subconsciously expressed her worries. Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by Wan Ruwaching. "Don't talk nonsense. Young Master Lee has a family. There's nothing going on between us." "I know. There is nothing between a man and a woman." The girl curled her lips and said, "He only knew how to use such an excuse to deceive her. If the two of them were innocent, why would he send them back in the middle of the night?" Honestly speaking, she still felt that there was nothing wrong with Sister Ruwaching being with him. "Yuju, you're asking for a beating, aren't you?" Wan Ruwaching pretended to wave her hand. The girl hurriedly stood up from her seat, stuck out her tongue and said, "If Sister Ruwaching feels embarrassed, I can be your matchmaker. I think he likes Sister Ruwaching very much." "You still say?" Wan Ruwaching blushed and hurriedly chased after her. The girl screamed, and immediately ran far away. The speed of County Magistrate Lee's recovery is far beyond my expectation. When Dr. Chen of Huichun Hall came for a follow-up examination, he checked Li Yi's pulse, and said with a look of amazement, "It was reasonable to say that an ordinary person would need at least several months to recover from his last injury. Even a strong person would need a month to recover to his current level. At this time, it was only 10 days since he was injured." This county lieutenant had the appearance of a frail scholar, but his recovery speed was truly amazing. Li Yi felt a chill in his heart when he saw the old man looking at him, as if he was some kind of precious object. The old man might even be thinking of taking him away for research. After sending Dr. Chen away, he didn't continue to lie down. He strolled in the yard for a while, and practiced Tai Chi twice to stretch his muscles and bones. These days his range of activities was from here to the brothel. He ate more and moved less. He didn't know if he had gained a few kilograms. With his current physical condition, it was beneficial to do some proper exercise. Of course, it was only limited to walking and practicing Tai Chi. It was not suitable for him to do more vigorous exercises. Rui brought Rui and Xiaohuan out. Regardless of ancient times or modern times, shopping was a woman's nature. It was the same for both young and old women, especially when their families were not short of money. The prosperous Qing and prefecture was a heavenly existence for them. As the weather turned cold, Rui couldn't produce any more. Rui's workshop was temporarily closed. The girls returned to the stockade village. With Rui and Rui here, there was no need to worry about their safety. Fang also came here occasionally. After living in the prefecture for a long time, they were not used to the various inconveniences of living in the stockade village. Perhaps because it was boring to stay at home alone. Rui also moved out a few days ago, and slept in the same room with Xiaohuan and Rui at night. Although this made the room a little crowded, the three girls used to live like this when they were young, so there was nothing strange about it. These few days he would still go to the brothel for a while every day. Sometimes he would sit in the yard with Rui and bask in the sun. He would watch Rui practice the Tai Chi swordsmanship that he had just taught her, and correct her mistakes from time to time. When he first taught Tai Chi to Rui, she could do it more accurately than him, after only watching it twice. Mississippi Lu might not be talented, so it was a good opportunity for Li Yi to satisfy his desire as a master. However, they were not here now. After Li Yi finished practicing 2 sets of fist techniques, he inadvertently glanced and saw a familiar head popping up on the opposite wall. The story of Ying Ning is not finished yet. The young girl leaned on the wall and watched him finish those strange movements. She looked over and said this. Li hadn't seen her climb the wall for a few days. At this moment, there was someone to relieve his boredom. The story of Ying Ning was actually almost finished a few times, and there were only a few parts left. Today, the young girl was obviously a little absent-minded. She listened quietly and didn't ask questions from time to time like before. After the story was finished, the young girl sighed and said, "After tomorrow, if you want to watch dramas and listen to songs, go to another brothel." "Why?" Lee asked with some doubts. Although there were many brothels in the neighboring houses, the environment where they were at was better. These days he had been going there every day. If he suddenly changed places, he wouldn't be used to it. Because there are too few customers. Grandpa's son and the others are all going to leave. The young girl sighed again and said slowly, "Customers were the foundation of their survival. If there were no customers, they couldn't even maintain the most basic survival. If they couldn't make money in one place, they naturally had to change places. Grandpa's son and the others actually had the intention to leave a long time ago. However, because of the story of Painted Skin last time, they still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. However, the depression of the next few days made them completely disappointed. Even if she told him the story of Ning, it would only be lively for a few days. Moreover, one or even a few stories couldn't feed so many people. If everyone left, she and Sister Ruoching naturally couldn't stay here. They didn't know how they would live in the future. "Leave. Don't." Lee saw that she didn't seem to be joking, and hurriedly persuaded her. If they all left, where would he go to spend his time in the future? Chapter 216. Brothels were places where it was easy to gather and disperse. Many of those storytellers, singers, and performers were entertainers who traveled across provinces and prefectures to roam Jianghu. If they could sustain a living in a place, they would be able to settle down for a long time. If they couldn't attract enough customers, they would naturally have to find another place to make a living. Even if they sang on stage in the same brothel, they might not meet again for the rest of their lives after a certain separation. Xiao Zhu and Wan Ruoching were born in Qing'an Prefecture. Although they wouldn't leave, if they left this group, their future would only be more difficult. If we can't attract customers, then we have to think of a way. What if we go to the next place, and there are still no customers? Li shook his head. These people only knew how to escape when they encountered problems. If escaping could solve problems, they wouldn't be so miserable now. Then let's go to the next place. The girl leaned on the wall and looked at Li as if it was a matter of course. Running around performing for a living was the current situation of this industry. A story was like a play. The more they performed in the same place, the fewer customers there would be. At this time, it was very necessary to go to a place where no one had heard or seen these things. Grandpa's son could tell the story of the painted skin for a few days every time he went to a place. When the people there were tired of hearing it, they would move on to the next place. It would be much better than staying there. No dreams, no goals, no customers. Can't you think of a way to attract customers? Li was exasperated that the entertainment industry in this world was still at a very primitive stage. Just a little bit of novelty would be enough to attract these ancient people who had not seen much of the world. You think it's easy to attract customers? The girl rolled her eyes at him. Even if they could invite people, most of them wouldn't give them money. Sometimes, they wouldn't even get a few copper coins in a day. You won't understand even if I tell you. Go, go, go. Call your sister watching over. It wasn't easy to communicate with this girl who wasn't very smart. Li waved his hand and said, "If you want to see big sister watching, just say it. Why are you looking for excuses?" He glanced at Li and climbed down the wall. "Sister watching, Li wants to see you." Wan Ruoching was in her room thinking about how to continue living in the prefecture city with Yuzhu in the future, when a young girl's shout came from outside the door. She didn't take the young girl's nonsense to heart, but she was afraid that he was looking for her for something. So she got up and walked out. Stage play? In the courtyard, Wan Ruoching looked at Li with a puzzled expression. "What's a stage play?" "A stage play is..." "Forget it, that's not important." Li knew that there was no such thing as a stage play in this world, and it would be troublesome to explain it to her. He said, "You can think of it as the acrobatics that are often performed in the brothels, but it's different. There's no need to make up a song, and the language is straightforward and easy to understand. You just need to make some changes according to the story. I'll use painted skin as an example. Hearing his description, Wan Ruoqing's face gradually showed a look of realization. Unlike any other play, it tried its best to restore the content of the story. Although it was very different from the current mainstream, it was easier to do and worth a try. The young girl stood behind Wan Ruoqing. After hearing Li Yi's description and imagining it in her mind, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. She was already scared enough just listening to Grandpa Sun's story. If all the doors and windows were closed, the room would be pitch black. If she performed painted skin on stage, wouldn't it be scary to imagine the malicious ghost baring its fangs and brandishing its claws on stage? She hurriedly erased these images from her mind, rolled her eyes and said, "But we can't always perform painted skin. The customers will get tired of it after watching it too much." Li glanced at this little girl. She was so young, yet so cunning. By saying this, wasn't she going back to the starting point and thinking about those stories? "I will provide you with the subsequent scripts and stories." After Li Yi spoke, the young girl's face lit up, but then she heard him say, "As for the distribution of profits, we'll discuss it after they all agree." Originally, Li Yi didn't intend to take out those stories, but if the old man and the others really left, the days in the future would probably be much more boring. Of course, the most important reason was because of Wan Ruoqing. From the young girl, he understood some of their current situation. After knowing her for so long, Li Yi had a general understanding of her character. She looked weak, but she was actually very independent and strong-willed. If he openly helped her, she would most likely refuse. This kind of cooperation would probably not touch her pride. Wan Ruoqing looked at her, and a hint of gratitude appeared in the depths of her eyes. She said, "If it wasn't for the fact that no one was willing to leave, they would definitely agree." The matter was urgent, so Wan Ruoqing and Xiao Zhu didn't stay for long. They had to discuss it with them first, before they could give Li Yi an answer. When the two of them walked out of the shop, 3 figures walked in from the opposite direction. "Miss, the son-in-law said that we're going to buy a big house in the prefectural city in the future. Are we not going back to the village?" Xiao Huan was holding some things she had just bought from the street as she spoke to Lu Rui. After living in the prefectural city for a few days, she finally understood what it meant to be lively and prosperous. She could see all kinds of people, and it was very convenient to buy things. Every day, she could accompany the son-in-law to the brothel to listen to music and watch dramas. It was much more interesting than the monotonous life in the village. "Why? Don't you want to go back to the village?" Lu Rui looked at her and asked with a smile. Xiao Huan thought about it, then shook her head and said, "Wherever the young miss is, Xiao Huan will be there." No matter where it was, of course, she would follow the young miss. However, if the son-in-law was in the prefectural city, the young miss would naturally be with him. As she spoke, she walked through the door. 2 women walked out of the shop. The shop had temporarily stopped selling Rui necklaces, so naturally, they could not be customers. Furthermore, the 2 women were not unfamiliar faces. One was the young girl who had scared her last time, and the other was the son-in-law's friend, who she often saw in the brothel next door. Lu Rui raised her head and looked at the woman who was walking towards her. The other party seemed to be stunned for a moment, then nodded slightly to acknowledge her before leaving with the young girl. She remembered clearly that this woman had been to her house once. She seemed to be her husband's friend. A few simple thoughts flashed through her mind, but she quickly threw them to the back of her mind. On the other side, when she was walking back to the brothel with Ruoqing, the young girl looked back a few times and couldn't help but say, "That person just now seems to be Li's wife. She's so beautiful." Then, as if she had thought of something, she turned to look at Wan Ruoqing and added, "Of course, elder sister Ruoqing is also very beautiful. She's not much inferior to her. No, she's even more beautiful than Li's wife." Wan Ruoqing only smiled and didn't say anything. Although she was unwilling to compare herself to his wife, she had to admit that the 2 of them were really a perfect match. Chapter 217. Grandpa, are we really leaving? At the entrance of the brothel, a 15 or 16-year-old boy looked back at the empty brothel with a look of reluctance to leave. "We're leaving. The storyteller, Old Man Sun, sighed. Helplessness appeared on his wrinkled face, and his muddy eyes also showed some reluctance to part. He had traveled to countless places in his life, and he had experienced this kind of parting many times. But every time, it was a completely different feeling. Humans were not plants. It would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for this place, but it was more important to rely on this craft to survive. While he was not so old that he could not walk, he should save some money to settle down and find a new job for his child. When he left, he could close his eyes in peace. There were many figures in the brothel, and most of them were performers who were packing their things. The boy glanced at them again, then turned his head and carried the luggage on his back. These were his sisters and brothers who he had been with day and night. He would probably never have the chance to see them again. Let's go. The old man's voice was low. He did not look inside again and walked straight ahead. The boy followed closely behind him, turning his head every 3 steps. When he reached the other exit of the house, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Grandpa Sun, wait a moment. A clear and melodious female voice sounded. The boy turned his head and saw the panting young girl chasing after him. A look of surprise finally appeared on his face. Sister Xiaozhu. A moment later, the dozen or so performers, including Old Man Sun, gathered in the brothel again, surrounding Wan Ruoqing and Xiaozhu. What? He is willing to provide us with stories and scripts. The wrinkles on Old Man Sun's face twisted into a flower, and he no longer had the melancholy from before. It's not free, he also wants payment. Xiaozhu reminded him. Of course. The old man nodded repeatedly, but he was inwardly lamenting. He had begged that young master many times, but he had not gotten what he wanted. He raised his head and looked at Wan Ruoqing, thinking that Miss Wan was indeed capable. There was a saying that since ancient times, talented men had a weakness for beautiful women. That's all he said. Whether we stay or leave depends on everyone's opinion, Wan Ruoqing said with a smile. I'll stay. Me too. With a good story and script, of course we won't leave. The reason why everyone left was because they couldn't attract enough customers, and they had no choice but to make a living. If the modern world was stable, who would be willing to wander around? The future was unknown, and it was very likely that it would be even more difficult than it was now. In the current situation, they needed a good story and a good script, just like the painted skin from a few days ago. If there was an endless supply of such stories, they wouldn't have to worry about such things in the future. How much does that young master want? The old man turned to look at Wan and looked at Wan. In Hua City, good books were often fought over by many, and were not cheap. In their current situation, they did not have to pay. Li had just told her about this matter. He did not mention the exact amount, but rather, he would be paid by taking a percentage of the profits. This method was more suitable for them, who did not have much money. They immediately conveyed Li Yi's message to everyone. Very soon, Li Yi received a reply from the actors. He could take 40% of the profits. Miss Xiaozhu told him this when she was leaning on the wall. This number was more than Li Yi had expected. According to his original plan, 20% to 30% would be enough. This was just to help Wan Ruoqing. He did not expect to make money from this. In the future, when he went to the brothel, he should be able to see more interesting things. He had already told Ruoqing the idea of the stage play. As for the more detailed aspects, he believed that they were more professional than him, so he did not need to worry too much. He had nothing to do these few days, so he wrote a few short stories from Strange Tales from Liao Zhai. The original stories were not long, so it did not take much effort. Although he could not make much money, it was still something. Many a little makes a mickle, and he would be able to get a place in the big house. The painted skin and Ying Ning were cheated by Miss Piglet with a few pieces of osmanthus cake. After writing a Chinese ghost story, she handed them to her from the wall. It was estimated that these would be enough to keep them busy for a while. Costumes, props, lines, and makeup all needed to be carefully prepared. Of course, there was also the background music that Li Yi had specifically reminded her about. A dry performance would be boring. Although many innate conditions could not be met due to the backward times, if she wanted to create a terrifying atmosphere, She could not do without background music. If she did not scare them to death, how could she let them pay for it happily? You look good. It seems that your body has recovered well. A voice came from behind. Li Yi turned his head and saw Li Yimingzu, whom he had not seen for a while, standing in the yard. Li Xian, whom she had not seen for a few days, stood beside her. His face was still as haggard as the last time they met. It seemed that he had been tortured by premarital anxiety recently. Except for a small internal injury, I have almost recovered. Now he was almost no different from ordinary people in other aspects, except that he could not do too much strenuous exercise. Since you have recovered, go back to the county government as soon as possible. Emingzi looked at him and said. The expression on Li Yi's face froze. Was he still a human? As the saying goes, it takes 100 days to recover when the muscles and bones are injured. He had suffered a more serious internal injury. It had only been half a month. Why should he go back to the county government? His face changed. He suddenly covered his chest with a painful expression on his face. No, I feel that my internal injury suddenly relapsed. Xiao Huan, help me back to my room to rest. All right. Don't pretend. Emingzi waved her hand and looked at him with disgust. When you feel that you have recovered, you can go to the county government. After he assigned all the affairs to his subordinates, the role of the county lieutenant was not so important. Father wanted to sharpen him in this position, but Emingzi, who knew him well, knew that even if he was not injured, he had all kinds of ways to be lazy. Her Highness's suggestion was very good. He had suffered a serious internal injury, and it would take about half a year to completely recover. He turned to look at Li Xian and asked, "Why do you have time to come out today? Did the old man give you a holiday?" Li Xian shook his head and said, "No, I bet with him which of 2 stones of different sizes would fall to the ground first." Before he finished his words, Li Yi had already understood. After this bet, the old man might not have the mood to educate Li Xian anymore. The most likely thing to do was to find a corner to think about life. At the age of half a foot in the coffin, Li Xian had destroyed his worldview. He could only wish the old man well in his heart, and hope that he could get through it. Chapter 218. Whether the old master, who had made the bet with Li Xian, had his worldview collapsed to the point of doubting life, and leading to an early onset of dementia, was not something that Li Yi needed to worry about. After the 2 hours of warmth in the morning, standing in the courtyard, and being blown by the cold wind, inevitably made his hands and feet cold. Returning to his room, he set up the heater, and immediately felt much more comfortable. Li Xian sat by the heater with his eyes unfocused. He did not speak, and looked like he was daydreaming. Li often saw him like this. When he knew the law of free fall, and that the ground under his feet was a big ball, he maintained this state for several days. Such a person was either a genius or a madman. No matter which one it was best not to disturb him when he was thinking. If a genius's train of thought was interrupted, he might fight you to the death. If a madman's train of thought was interrupted, he would definitely fight you to the death. Li Xian's mind was wandering, but the gaze of the person beside him had always been on him. Li Yi glanced at the bronze mirror in the room, and did not find anything dirty on his face. He looked at Emingzi and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" Since entering the room, Li Yi found that she had been looking at him. Although it was inevitable that his vanity would be a little satisfied when being looked at by a noble beauty, this person's identity was too noble. She was a princess. If she looked at him for a long time, and felt that the young man in front of her was really elegant, handsome, and talented, what would happen if she wanted to recruit him as her son-in-law? No matter which dynasty it was, being a son-in-law was not a good job. Not to mention that he could not have 3 or 4 wives. He had to be controlled by his wife everywhere. Normal men would not be willing to suffer like this. What's more, a violent woman like her would be unlucky to marry anyone. As his thoughts began to wander, he saw Emingzi stretch out her hand. She wanted to look, but she also wanted to touch. Rui and Xiaohuan were still at home. Li Yi's expression turned serious, and was about to stop her when he suddenly saw her raise her wrist and grab his face. "Are you kidding me? You want to destroy something you can't get?" He had only asked, Why are you looking at me? Could it be that the old Li family, whose ancestral home was in the northeast, could trigger a fierce battle with a simple, "What are you looking at?" Li Yi's heart skipped a beat, and his body instinctively made a defensive move. He grabbed her wrist with one hand, and with a simple Tai Chi push he pushed her back. She resisted so easily, which meant that she didn't use any strength just now. While Li Yi was puzzled, Emmingzi looked at him in surprise and asked, "What kind of kung fu is this?" The first time she saw Li Yi use this kind of kung fu, a seed of curiosity had been planted in her heart. Later, her wife used this kind of kung fu to force the nanny to retreat with one move. She had read all the martial arts books collected by the royal family, but she didn't remember this kind of kung fu. It seemed to be different from any sect in the martial arts world. "This is called Tai Chi, how is it? Isn't it awesome?" Only then did Li Yi realize that she wanted to learn Tai Chi. He looked at her and said, "If you want to learn, call me master and I can teach you." Since the chance of becoming a martial arts master was very slim, it was not bad to have a powerful disciple. Originally, Rui was the best candidate. However, after Li Yi mentioned it vaguely last time, she forced him to practice with her. The next day, she almost couldn't get out of bed. After that, she never mentioned it again. It seemed that it was not bad to have a princess as a disciple. She had a noble status and was good at martial arts. She was pleasing to the eye, and she would be flattered by the royal family. It was a good thing to kill many birds with one stone. Emmingzi didn't say anything, but her eyes showed her disgust. With her current level of martial arts cultivation, only a grandmaster could be her master. He glanced at Li Yi. Just based on his weak appearance, he felt that he was too poor to be accepted as a disciple. If she didn't want to bow, then so be it. He was too lazy to teach her. Li Yi curled his lips and thought, "Why haven't they left yet?" Looking at the sky, "It's almost time for dinner. Don't stay and eat for free later. There's no extra food at home today. Why hasn't Xiaohuan come in yet? It's time to serve tea and send the guests off." "Haha, I know. There are 35 heads on the top, 94 legs on the bottom, 12 rabbits and 23 chickens." At this moment Li Xian, who had been in a trance, suddenly had a glimmer of light in his eyes. He jumped up from the chair and laughed. "Old man, you want to use this question to stump me? You must be dreaming." Li Yi didn't know what the old man Li Xian was talking about would think if he heard those words. In any case, Li Yi would be scared by him. Just as he was thinking about how to tactfully ask them to leave, Li Xian suddenly jumped up, as if he was having a seizure. His hands and feet danced as he muttered something under his breath. He seemed to have gone mad, and he almost kicked the heater on the floor. "What's wrong?" "Hysteria." In shock, he immediately stood up. If the crown prince became hysterical and became silly in the future, would Prince Ning chop him up to make dumplings? Even Emmingzi was shocked. She also thought that Li Xian suddenly had a hysteria and pinched his philtrum. "Ouch, ouch. Let go." Li Xian finally stopped having a seizure. He covered the part above his lips that was red from Mingzhu's pinch and breathed heavily. Li Yi and Emmingzi looked at each other and felt relieved. "What's wrong? Have you thought of a way to reject the marriage?" Li Yi looked at him and asked. Seeing how excited he was just now, Li Yi really couldn't think of anything that could make him so happy. "No, let's not talk about this first." Li Xian waved his hand and looked at Li Yi. He asked expectantly, "You are the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom. How about I give you a question?" "Nothing much." As long as Li Xian didn't have a hysteria in front of him, it was fine. As for answering questions, it was almost time for dinner. Who had the free time? As for the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom, he had the title of a scholar and didn't give any money. Whoever wanted to be the scholar could be the one. The expectant expression on Li Xian's face froze. There was no way to continue this conversation. "Are you afraid?" Li Xian looked at him and asked. "Yes, I'm afraid." It was child's play to provoke Li Yi. "I bet 10 taels of silver." "No way." 100 taels. "Deal." After a series of twists and turns, under the witness of the princess, the two of them quickly reached a friendly wager. They bet on whether or not Li Yi could answer Li Xian's question. The wager was 100 taels of silver, and the agreed time was 30 minutes. After clapping their hands to seal the vow, Li Xian looked at Li Yi with a proud face. This problem was given to him by the old man yesterday. He had spent a whole day trying to figure out the crux of the problem. 100 taels of silver was nothing to him. It was enough to make Li Yi suffer and feel the taste of racking his brains. He was already satisfied. He had been tortured by him so many times in the past. Today was the day to take revenge and wipe away the humiliation. After making a comparison on the IQ level, Li Yi felt that the question Li Xian mentioned should not be difficult for him. Just now, he vaguely heard him say something about heads, legs, and chickens and rabbits. Could it be the problem of chickens and rabbits living in the same cage? Today, there are rabbits living in the same cage. There are 35 heads and 94 legs. How many rabbits are there? Li Xian crossed his arms and looked proud, as if he had won. You have 30 minutes to think about it. Li Yimingzu raised her eyebrows. She had heard of this mathematics question before and knew the answer. However, the specific method of solving the question was not recorded in the book. It must have been lost in the process of being passed down. Even the Imperial Library did not have any record of it. The possibility of it existing among the common people was even smaller. Li Yi sighed. If it was so easy to make money every time, why would he spend so much effort to study perfume and soap? If there was a chance in the future, he would get to know more princes and take the initiative to send a lot of money to him. What a wonderful life. There is no need for 30 minutes. As soon as Li Xian's voice fell, Li looked at him and said, 12 rabbits, 23 chickens, is this answer correct? The proud expression on Li Xian's face froze again. Chapter 219. You must have heard the answer I just said, or you have seen this question before. Li Xian was stunned for a moment, and then he said with certainty, if Li Yi gave the answer after the time it took to burn a stick of incense, he would also feel surprised, but it was within his tolerance. After all, in his eyes, even if Li Yi was not the smartest person in the Jing Kingdom, he was not far from it. However, Li Yi could give the correct answer as soon as he said the question. He was not a human, but a demon. This time Li Xian really guessed wrong. Just now, he suddenly jumped up, which scared Li Yi. He was not in the mood to listen to what this guy said. Although he had seen a similar question before, the answer would be different if the number was changed. There was no second possibility. In the future, as long as a primary school student had learned Olympiad mathematics, he or she would be able to say the answer without cheating. Using such a difficult question to test him, wasn't it asking to be humiliated? Hee, if you want to renege on your debt, just say it. Why do you need to find such an excuse? Li Yi said disdainfully, curling his lips and looking at him. Li Xian's handsome face turned red. As a dignified prince, it was not good to say that he reneged on his debt. However, he was more eager to know how Li Yi got the answer. As long as you tell me how you solved this question, I will give you another 100 taels in addition to the 100 taels we agreed on. Money was just a number to Li Xian. He was more interested in the novel methods that Li Yi used every time. Even Li Mingzhu's gaze landed on Li Yi. She also knew how to solve this question, but she did not know the reason. If she tried it one by one, she would naturally be able to find out the answer after spending some time. However, for him to be able to solve it so quickly, either he knew the answer beforehand, or he used a method that they had never seen before. To Li Xian, money was just a number, but to Li Yi, it wasn't. It was like a brick, a tile, or a room in a large mansion. You just said, there are 35 heads and 94 legs? His words indicated that he agreed with Li Xian's action of giving money. Li Xian nodded repeatedly. Let's assume, just assume. Li stretched out his hand and gestured. Let's assume that these chickens and rabbits are well trained. Li Xian was confused. Solving a question was solving a question. What did it have to do with these chickens and rabbits being well trained? However, since Li Yi had always taken the unusual path, he felt that he should listen to him first. Mingzi frowned when she heard that, but she quickly relaxed. Obviously, she had the same idea as Li Xian. If these chickens and rabbits are very obedient, they will raise one leg when I clap my hands. How can there be such a solution? Li Xian could not bear to listen anymore. How could there be such obedient chickens and rabbits? If such a bizarre method could work, then he might as well let those chickens and rabbits speak the human language and tell them the number of their own kind. Li Yi glared at him. Do you still want to know the solution? If you continue to talk nonsense like this, the money will be gone. Although Li Xian was stupid, he was not that stupid. Continue. Emingzu seemed to understand something. She urged him with a strange look in her eyes. Li Yi looked at Li Xian with a complicated look. Li Xian understood what he meant. He was laughing at himself for being inferior to Emingzu. However, Emingzu had been intelligent since she was young. When she was young and was taught by a teacher in the palace, Li Xian discovered this. Although this was an indisputable fact, why did he feel so upset in his heart? When you clap your hands once, a total of 35 legs are raised. When you clap your hands twice, a total of 70 legs are raised. At this moment, all the chickens are sitting in the cages. There are no legs to count. Each rabbit is left with 2 legs. There are 24 legs left in the cages. The number of rabbits is 12, and the chickens is 23. As Li Yi spoke slowly, Mingzhu's eyes shone brightly. Li Xian was stunned. At this moment, perhaps only the words, 10,000 horses galloping could describe his true feelings. How could this be possible? The problem that had been bothering him for a whole day could be solved with just 2 claps of his hands? That was not what the old man said yesterday. He said that this was a problem passed down from ancient times. Even if he could not solve it, it did not matter. Because the headmaster only knew the answer, but did not know the specific solution. He looked back at Li Yi. He was indeed a demon. Li Yi saw Li Xian's expression, but he was not surprised. There were no Arabic numerals or quadratic equations in this world. Mathematics could only be called arithmetic at best. It was still in the stage of ignorance. Only in a few hundred years would there be a great mathematician who was an astronomer or a Taoist priest. After all, the imperial examinations did not test these things. Mathematics was not highly valued. It was not unusual for a doctor of mathematics from the Imperial Academy to be stumped by a problem of chickens and rabbits in the same cage. The method he used just now was called leg-raising method. It was not a joke on the internet in the future. In the ancient classic of arithmetic, Sun Tzu's arithmetical classic, this was indeed how to solve this problem. From the reactions of Li Xian and Emingzu, it could be inferred that Sun Tzu's arithmetical classic either did not exist in this world, or it had been too long, and this method of solving problems had been lost. There is actually such a method of solving problems. It is really incredible. Li Xian could not help but exclaim. He was actually not that interested in mathematics. He only wanted to solve this problem and impress the headmaster who taught him. After thinking for a whole day, he finally managed to figure out the correct answer in his mind. Using Li Yi's unconventional method, it only took him 2 breaths of time. Unbelievable, isn't it? That's fine, we can try another method. Li Yi was quite generous. At the very least, he wanted to make Li Xian feel that the loss of 200 silver taels was worth it. There is actually another method? Li Xian exclaimed and moved his head closer. First, you need to remember a new method of counting. Emingzu and Li Xian watched as Li Yi used a brush to write and draw on the Xian paper. Those strange and simple patterns were something they had never seen before. When put together, it turned out to be a new method of counting. Both of them had received aristocratic education and had a deep foundation. Although this method looked novel, it was not difficult to understand. After a simple explanation from Li Yi, they spent a little time digesting this set of rules. In their hearts they were amazed. This method was undoubtedly much better than the current method of counting in the Jing Kingdom. It was much more convenient and simple. This is called the equal sign, this is the plus sign, this is the minus sign, and this is the cross. You can understand it as the number that we don't know yet. Li did not think too much at first. When he started to explain, he realized that it was not much easier to teach them this knowledge than to teach 2 children who had just entered elementary school. However, since he had already said it, he naturally could not give up halfway. He could only be patient and push forward bit by bit. After an hour, Just like this. Solve the two unknown numbers, and you will get the number of the chicken and the number of the rabbit. Li Yi let out a long sigh of relief. He had finally taught them from the beginning to the end, and he felt a little exhausted. It was so easy to teach naughty children. He could just make up a story to fool them. If Li Xian asked this kind of question again in the future, he would not do it unless he paid more. Do you understand? He looked at the two of them and asked expectantly. Although the process was a little complicated, if they understood it, it would be a little comforting. No, Li Xian said without the slightest bit of hesitation. Li Yimingzu was also puzzled. 2 pieces of rotten wood. Li Yi sighed in his heart. Xiao Huan, send the guests out. Looking at the little servant girl who had walked to the door, Li Yi said decisively. Young master, it's time to eat. The little servant girl stood at the door and said weakly. No rush, no rush. Eat first. After eating, you can explain it to me a few more times and I should understand. Li Xian patted his shoulder and stood up. He looked at the little servant girl with a smile and asked, Miss Xiao Huan, where do you want to eat? Chapter 220. The nobles of the royal family, the princes and princesses. When freeloading, there was no self-restraint and etiquette to speak of. Because there were guests, as the in-laws, Rui and Xiao Huan were eating in another room. Li Xian looked at the bubbling hot pot on the stove, and was very curious. He had never tried this kind of eating method. He did not stand on ceremony with Li Yi, scooped up a piece of mutton, and stuffed it into his mouth. He was so hot that he breathed like a dog, but he was reluctant to spit it out. His face was red, and it took him a while to recover. Emingzu was like him. A piece of tofu was already in her chopsticks. Seeing Li Xian's appearance, she let it cool for a while before eating slowly. Li Yi was a little distressed. In the early winter weather, fresh vegetables were extremely difficult to find. Even if there was, the price was relatively high. And because it was stored in the cellar, the taste and nutrition could not be compared to fresh vegetables. Therefore, the weekly hot pot was mainly mushrooms, accompanied by tofu, carrots, meat, and very few cabbage and vegetables. Unfortunately, this time, Li Xian and the others happened to come. After swallowing it with great difficulty the first time, his stomach burned. Li Xian learned his lesson the second time. He first placed the food he scooped up into a bowl and waited for it to cool. Then, he looked at Li Yi with satisfaction and said, This is the first time I've tried eating this way. Tomorrow, I'll have the chef from the Wang estate come over and learn. I'm sick of eating that stuff all day. This method of scooping food directly from the pot was very suitable for this cold weather. After eating delicacies for so many years, one would be tired of it. It was good to change the taste occasionally. Li Xian, who had freeloaded at Rui restaurant many times, felt that the food cooked by Li Yi was more to his taste than the food in the Wang mansion. He really did not know whether the imperial chefs that Uncle Huang rewarded to the Wang mansion were real. If Li Yi went to the Wang mansion to be a chef, eating every day would be something to be happy about. Li Yi didn't know that the guy in front of him was already thinking about poaching him. He was busy scooping out some of his favorite dishes. If he was a little slower, he wouldn't be able to eat anymore. Halfway through the meal, Emingzu caught a glimpse of a wine jar on the bedside cabinet. Her eyes lit up and she stood up. Before Li Yi could remind her, she had already opened the jar and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Li Yi helplessly rubbed the space between his eyebrows. That was the alcohol he used to disinfect his wounds, and its concentration was more than 70%. Emingzu put down the wine jar, and her face flushed red. I'm tired, I'm going to sleep for a while. After that, she lay down on Li Yi's bed and no longer made a sound. When did Mingzhu's alcohol tolerance become so bad? Li Xian murmured doubtfully. Then he waved his hand and said, Don't worry about her. Since we're free, let's talk about that binary quadratic equation system. Li Yi felt that he had almost forgotten everything that he had just said. He didn't even understand binary quadratic equation. He probably wouldn't have the ability to solve binary quadratic equation in this lifetime. After 2 hours, Li Xian finally left with satisfaction. Although there were some things that he hadn't figured out yet, it was only a matter of time. Today's trip had been rewarding, Both his body and mind had been greatly satisfied. Emingzili also left. She was carried away by the old woman that he saw last time. When the old woman carried her up from the bed, she even looked at Li Yi suspiciously, as if he had done something improper to the princess. This made Li Yi rather depressed. He could do it to anyone but not to her. If he accidentally hurt his hand, it would be too late to cry. After the two finished eating, they wiped their mouths clean and left, leaving behind a mess. Xiaohuan had to clean it up. The young prince kept his promise and moved quickly. In less than 2 hours, a guard had delivered 200 taels of silver to him. He asked Xiaohuan to send the silver directly to Rui. The key to the small treasury was kept by Rui. Li usually only cared about earning and not spending. When he needed money, he only needed to let her know. No matter how much Li Yi needed, she never asked where the silver went. After eating, it was not appropriate to lie down immediately. He went to the courtyard to digest the food and guide Rui. With Li Xian's intelligence, it was impossible for him to figure out Arabic numerals and quadratic equations in such a short time. He should not bother him for the next 2 days. At this time, in King Ning's mansion, Li Xian, who had just returned to the mansion, looked at an old man in front of him with concern. He asked, "Is Teacher Wu feeling better?" Opposite Li Xian, the old man with white hair and beard stroked his beard and said, "Thank you for your concern, Crown Prince. I am fine." Then, the old man sighed and said with great sorrow, "I never thought that the big and small stones would fall at the same time. I have been wrong all my life. Teacher, do not worry. Humans are not saints. We cannot know all the truths of the world." Li Xian comforted him. "Moreover, the world is so big. There are many things that we have not thought of, such as..." Haha, Crown Prince's words are reasonable. Even saints cannot avoid mistakes, not to mention us mortals. He did not expect the Crown Prince to say such things. The old man was very pleased. It seemed that the Crown Prince had improved a lot under his guidance. He would be able to answer to the prince in the future. He asked with a smile, "Like what?" Li Xian smiled slightly. "For example, Teacher thought I was going to give an example." Looking at Teacher Wu's dull expression, Li Xian felt very happy. The trick he learned from Li Yi was really practical. The old man could not stand Li Xian's sudden change. After a short moment of shock, Teacher Wu's old face showed some embarrassment. He said, "Since the Crown Prince is back, let's start today's lesson early." The old man had obviously recovered from the shock of the morning and was dutifully finishing the lesson that he had missed. Li Xian was not interested in the old man's lesson about calendars and astronomy. It was not only because it was boring, but also because there was an important reason. What Teacher Wu said was very different from what he had learned from Li Yi. He looked at the old man and said, "I still have one thing that I do not understand. I hope Teacher can explain it." "Crown Prince, please speak." Teacher Wu was even more pleased. It was a good thing that there was a question. It meant that the Crown Prince had listened to what he had taught. Teacher once said that the sky is like a hat, and the earth is like a chessboard. Does this mean that the sky is round and the earth is square? The old man nodded and said, "The sky is like a dome and the earth is like a chessboard. It means that we should complement each other. This is also the core of the yin-yang theory of Taoism." The old man had a deep understanding of Taoism all his life. The saying that the sky is round and the earth is square was the embodiment of the yin-yang theory. Naturally, he would not doubt it. "I wonder if Teacher has ever seen a sail on the sea?" Li suddenly asked. The old man did not know why the Crown Prince would ask such a question, but he still nodded and said, "When I was young, I traveled the 4 seas. Of course, I have seen it." "Then I wonder if Teacher still remembers what part of a sail you first see when it comes from the sea?" Li Xian asked again with a smile. "The mast, of course," the old man said without hesitation. At this moment, he was even more curious. What was the Crown Prince trying to ask? Li Xian smiled and said, "If the earth is as flat as a chessboard, shouldn't you see the whole ship? Why do you see the mast first?" "Unless the earth under our feet is round." Li Xian stretched out his palm and made an arc. The old man was shocked and wanted to argue. However, when he opened his mouth, he realized that he could not provide any evidence. Absurd, this is simply absurd. The elder's face darkened. This was something passed down from his ancestors. So he naturally would not believe that the knowledge of the past few decades was wrong. If the crown prince's words were to spread, he was afraid that he would become a laughingstock and lose face for the royal family. Li Xian's expression became somewhat displeased. He was trying to reason with the other party. Yet the old man didn't answer him directly, and kept saying that he was babbling nonsense and pestering him endlessly. This was Li Xian's fault. If teacher still has doubts about this, I can give you a few more examples. Teacher Wu's heart had already begun to waver. When he heard what Li Xian said next, for the first time, he doubted what he had learned all these years. His body trembled, and his face became paler. He no longer cared about his status and shouted, "Shut up!" If he allowed Teacher Wu to continue, the faith he had built all these years would collapse. Chapter 221. Teacher, there's still something I don't understand. Seeing Teacher Wu leave in a panic with a pale face, Li Xian hurriedly chased after him. Teacher, don't go. We haven't finished today's homework. Hearing the footsteps behind him, the old man's heart skipped a beat. His old arms and legs, which were usually not very agile, suddenly exploded with infinite potential. In the blink of an eye, Li Xian could no longer see Teacher Wu's figure. Li was right. Humans have infinite potential. His Royal Highness stood where he was. He thought of Teacher Wu's wind-like figure and murmured, "Tomorrow, it should be Teacher Chen's turn, right?" That day, the servants in the prince's mansion saw a scene that shocked them to the core. Teacher Wu, who was over 60 years old, was running quickly in the prince's mansion. He went straight to the prince's study. A few young and strong servants could not catch up with him. After a while, Teacher Wu was stopped by an old servant at the door of Prince Ning's study. "Teacher, why are you in such a hurry?" the old servant asked with a puzzled expression. I want to see the prince," Teacher Wu said while panting. After running for so long, he was a little out of breath. The old servant saw Teacher Wu's anxious and hurried expression. He was afraid that something important had happened. So he said, "Teacher Wu, please wait here for a moment. I will go and inform the prince." Teacher Wu nodded when he heard this. He could use this time to catch his breath. Not long after, the old servant walked out of the study and said, "Teacher Wu, the prince wants to see you." Although Teacher Wu was much older than Prince Ning, there was an order of seniority. He straightened his clothes and walked in unhurriedly. At the desk on the right side of the study, Prince Ning put down the book in his hand and stood up. He asked with a smile, "Teacher Wu, why are you looking for I? Did Xian heir offend Teacher Wu?" "That is not the case." The prince misunderstood. Teacher Wu waved his hand and said, "His Royal Highness is talented and intelligent. I have nothing more to teach him. This time, I came to ask for your resignation." "Resign?" Prince Ning frowned and asked, "Headmaster, why do you say that? If Xian is naughty and mischievous and offends you, please don't take it to heart. I will reprimand him, but don't mention the resignation again." Although this Teacher Wu had retired, his knowledge was not inferior to those great scholars in the court. Prince Ning had invited him to teach Li Xian, which was a great affirmation of his ability. He was extremely knowledgeable and experienced, so how could he not have anything to teach? This was no longer humility, it was mockery. Could it be that little Xian had really offended Teacher Wu? Teacher Wu smiled bitterly and said, "Your Royal Highness has misunderstood. The Crown Prince is gifted and intelligent, which is rare in this world. It is my good fortune to be recognized by your Royal Highness to teach the Crown Prince. However, this old man is old and unable to do as I wish. I hope your Royal Highness will agree to my resignation." Teacher Wu's words were half true and half false. His resignation was true, but his inability to do as he wished was a lie. The real reason he left was to preserve his reputation in his old age. If he heard the Crown Prince's shocking words again, he would not close his eyes when he passed away. His Highness the Crown Prince's words had a huge impact on him. If it was just nonsense, it would be fine. He was confident that he could persuade the Crown Prince to walk the right path. But the scary thing was that after thinking about it carefully, He actually faintly felt that the crown prince's words made sense. This was really embarrassing. He had spent his entire life to build up his understanding of this world. But because of a few words from the crown prince, he was on the verge of collapse. He did not dare to teach the crown prince anymore. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would die with everlasting regret. Prince Ning stared at Teacher Wu with a pair of tiger eyes. There was no dissatisfaction or mockery on his face. Could it be that what he said just now was all from the bottom of his heart? Teacher Wu was determined and had made up his mind to leave. No matter how Prince Ning tried to persuade him to stay, it was useless. In the end, Prince Ning agreed. At that moment, his heart was full of doubts. After Teacher Wu left, he called out to the door, "Go and find little Xian." "I will go now." The old servant outside the door responded and left in a hurry. Not long after, Li Xian knocked on the door of the study and walked in. He asked, "Father, why are you looking for me?" Prince Ning looked at him coldly. "What did you do to Teacher Wu?" "He just came to ask for my resignation. He has already left the king's mansion." "Ah, Teacher Wu resigned?" Li Xian's face was full of shock and joy. "This is really true." He looked up and saw his father looking at him. His tone changed. "This is really a pity. Teacher Wu is very knowledgeable, and little Xian admires him. I didn't expect him to care so much about right and wrong that he resigned in shame. If I had known, I would not have pointed out his mistakes in front of him." Prince Ning's eyebrows twitched. They had been together for almost 20 years. How could he not know what Li Xian was capable of? Pointing out Teacher Wu's mistakes and making him resign in shame? Even in a few decades, Li Xian might not have the ability to do so. He did not want to pursue the matter. He waved his hand and said, Go. Teacher Wu has left. You must humbly seek guidance from Teacher Chun and Teacher Zhao. Do not cause trouble like this again." "I understand." Li Xian agreed readily and left the study. He looked at the old servant and asked, "Teacher Wu really left?" The old servant nodded. Teacher Wu and the king were talking in the room just now. They did not purposely lower their voices, so he heard everything from the door. "Go to the accountant's office and withdraw 100 taels of silver. Send it to Teacher Wu," Li Xian casually ordered and walked forward. Although he was kind enough to help Teacher Wu better understand the world, he did not consider the old man's age. It would not be easy for him to accept it. He should use a gentler method. Otherwise, Teacher Wu would not have resigned and left the king's mansion. He was knowledgeable and knew everything. It would be a pity if he left just like that. Watching Li Xian's leisurely departing figure, the old servant sighed. Although the king's mansion was not short of silver, it could not withstand His Royal Highness's extravagance every time. Did His Royal Highness solve the question from 2 days ago? The old man with a square face and white hair asked Li Xian with his hands behind his back. "Yes, I did," Li Xian said with a nod. "How did His Royal Highness solve it?" the old man asked again. He was just asking casually. This question could be solved with some time. However, there was no other way to solve it. He did not have high hopes for His Royal Highness. Leg raising method 2 element 2, 2 element 1. Quadratic equation method, Li Xian said with a smile. The old man's expression froze. Leg raising method. What formula? Li Xian took a pen and paper from the side and began to write. Leg raising method, it's like this. 2 hours later, the paper was densely packed. He turned to look at the old man and asked, Teacher Chen, are these 2 methods correct? Teacher Chen nodded mechanically. Until now he was still confused about the Arabic numerals, counting methods, equations, and unknown numbers that Li Xian had just introduced. He could not tell right from wrong. However, although he had never seen these things before, the answers were correct. Presumably the process would not be wrong. However, where did His Royal Highness learn about these strange symbols and methods? He had studied mathematics all his life, and had never heard of such a wonderful method. I still have a few questions that I hope Teacher can answer. For some unknown reason, when Teacher Chen saw the Crown Prince looking at him with a smile on his face, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Today, there is 1 rooster worth 5 coins, 1 hen worth 3 coins, and 3 chicks worth 1 coin. Today, I bought 100 chickens with free money, asked the old rooster, the hen, and the chicks. The wall is 5 feet thick. 2 mice pass through it. The big mouse passes 1 foot a day, and the small mouse also passes 1 foot. The big mouse passes twice a day, and the small mouse passes half a day. When will they meet, and how much do they pass through? Li Xian said lightly. He threw out the difficult questions that he had gotten from Li Yi yesterday. Teacher Chen was dumbstruck. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Cough, I am not feeling well today. My lessons will be postponed. Your Royal Highness can arrange it yourself. A moment later, Teacher Chen wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. He got up and left in a hurry after throwing down these words. The depression that had accumulated over the past few days was swept away. Li Xian's face was glowing. He walked like a dragon or a tiger, high-spirited and vigorous. Along the way, the servant girls of the prince's residence avoided him. What was wrong with His Royal Highness today? Why was he smiling so indescribably? Chapter 222. What? Teacher Chen is also going to resign? In the study, Prince Ning frowned slightly. He looked at the white-haired old man in front of him and repeated what he had just said. The old man sat on the chair and cupped his hands together as he said, His Royal Highness is being taught by an expert. I can no longer teach him anything in the way of mathematics. After talking with His Royal Highness in the morning, he had pretended that he was not feeling well and said that he would postpone his lessons. In fact, when he returned home, he had not slept at all. He had meticulously organized the contents of what His Royal Highness had said. The Arabic numerals and the symbols for addition and subtraction were easy to write and could be used to calculate or calculate. It was much more convenient than the current methods. If it could be implemented, the field of mathematics would definitely be greatly developed. As for the equations, the level of design was even more mysterious. Teacher Chen had studied mathematics for decades, so he could naturally see that it was extraordinary. What he had learned from His Royal Highness was probably just the tip of the iceberg. As for the last question that His Royal Highness had consulted him, he had thought hard all night but could not solve it. Or perhaps he had tried to find an answer, but there was no convincing method. Of course, he did not think that His Royal Highness had suddenly been enlightened and happened to show such amazing talent in mathematics that even an old man like him, who had studied this field for decades, would feel ashamed. The only explanation was that His Royal Highness was being taught by an expert. As for how powerful this expert was, it was at least to the extent that he had to look up to him. He thought about how Mr. Wu had left in a hurry 2 days ago, without even informing them. After 2 days of curiosity, Mr. Chen figured out the reason for Mr. Wu's resignation. He was afraid that Teacher Wu had encountered the same situation as him. With such an expert behind His Royal Highness, it was naturally better for him to resign early. Expert. When Prince Ning heard this, his face showed some surprise. These days, His Royal Highness had been in the prince's residence, receiving guidance from the 3 teachers. Aside from them, who else could it be? Could it be Teacher Zhao? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a servant came to report that Teacher Zhao had asked to see him. Prince Ning was stunned for a moment, as if he had thought of something. He had not seen Teacher Zhao, but he had more or less understood what Teacher Zhao wanted to say. This old man has specially come to ask for your highness' resignation. Teacher Zhao did not take a seat. After exchanging glances with Teacher Chen, Teacher Zhao went straight to the point. Both Teacher Wu and Teacher Chen had resigned for some unknown reason, leaving Teacher Zhao alone. Naturally, he felt uneasy. After the 2 of them left, he would be next. Rather than being forced to do so, it would be better for him to leave early. At least he could save some face. The 2 headmasters were determined to leave. Prince Ning tried to persuade them to stay, but to no avail, so he gave up on the idea. He sent someone to prepare a generous gift for the 2, and did not say anything more. Inviting these teachers to teach the crown prince was just to sharpen his temper and get rid of his previous lazy and casual habits. It would be best if he could become mature and diligent. However, it seemed that he had overestimated the abilities of these teachers. The application of mathematics is very broad. Astronomy, geography, architecture, taxation, and even food and fodder during battles are all inseparable from mathematics. If the Crown Prince's new method of counting can be implemented, it will be a blessing for the Jing Kingdom. Before Teacher Chen left, he said a few words to Prince Ning with a serious expression. He was very respectful of the Crown Prince's new method of counting. His words were sincere and sincere. If it was not for the difference in status and age, he might have turned to the Crown Prince to learn more advanced mathematics. Although the imperial examination did not test one's ability in mathematics, the Directorate of Studies still maintained a course in mathematics. Every few years, the Directorate of Studies would recruit talented people in this field. Teacher Chen had studied mathematics all his life, so he naturally knew the use of mathematics. It covered a wide range that others could not even imagine. It was a pity that very few people could recognize this. Mathematics had never been valued by the imperial court, so it was naturally even more difficult to promote it. Right now there was no doubt that it was a rare opportunity to develop mathematics. After the two of them left, a charming woman walked out from behind the screen in the study. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong with the two teachers? Is there any expert behind little Xian?" Just now, when she was behind the screen, she was also confused by what she heard. Yesterday, Teacher Wu's departure had already surprised her. He said that there was nothing he could teach little Xian. What Teacher Chen said just now seemed to be what he meant. There is no expert, but there is an extraordinary person, Prince Ning said coldly. What extraordinary person? The confusion on Princess Ning's face deepened. She looked at Prince Ning and said angrily, "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you keeping me in suspense?" Prince Ning turned to look at her and asked, "Madam, do you remember Li Yi?" "Of course I remember," Princess Ning said as she rolled her eyes. She had a very deep impression of the young man who cured her of her depression, invented Rui Dew and perfume, and saved the emperor at the prince's mansion. Could it be him? Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. She said, "Does your highness mean that the expert who made the two teachers feel ashamed of their inferiority is that Li Yi? Who else could it be other than him?" Prince Ning snorted again. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. "Forget it. Since little Xian doesn't like it, let him be." Princess Ning waved her hand and said, "Because of that marriage, little Xian has been depressed for a long time. Let him decide these things himself. Marriage is an important matter. It is the order of the parents. Moreover, marrying into the Wang family is my brother." Prince Ning stopped there and said, "I can only let little Xian suffer," Princess Ning said with a sigh. "There is nothing to suffer," Prince Ning said. Prince Ning said, "In terms of family background, talent and appearance, Mingzhu of the Wang family is not worthy of him. Next year, he will be at the age of 20. The marriage can't be delayed any longer." A look of pity appeared in Princess Ning's eyes. She didn't want to continue this topic. She changed the topic and said, "Li Yi is about the same age as little Xian, but he has so many abilities. Every one of them is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Is there really a person who is born with knowledge in this world?" He was the top talent of the Jing Kingdom. He excelled in both poetry and painting. The Rui Dew perfume liquor and the soap that little Xian gave her were all made by him. Of course, his miraculous medical skills had even made her and the emperor feel indebted to him. In terms of knowledge, Xian had only met him once, and the two knowledgeable teachers had resigned out of shame. All of this was related to a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was really unimaginable. I'm afraid only the heavens know whether there is a person who is born with knowledge in this world. King Ming said faintly, "However, his identity is much more interesting than I imagined." Hearing this, Princess Ning became curious. "Hasn't your highness already investigated his identity? Could it be that there are other secrets?" Prince Ning nodded. Ever since he got involved with his brother, he had to be more careful. Naturally, he couldn't treat him like before. He sent people to conduct a more detailed investigation. This time, he unexpectedly discovered something interesting. However, the conversation between the two of them in the study was not heard by outsiders. Chapter 223. He didn't know if it was because he had taught Li Xian too much last time, that he hadn't completely digested it, or because he was confined in the prince's mansion. Li Yi didn't see him in Rui's house for the next few days. Ruoqing was rehearsing the new play with the actors and actresses. The brothel that Li Yi frequented didn't open for several days. Only the young girl Xiao Zhu, who liked to climb walls, would occasionally poke her head out from the other side of the wall to ask him some questions about the details. After getting the answers, she would quickly jump off the wall and disappeared for a long time. Fortunately, he wasn't idle these days. When he had nothing to do, he would write out the stories and scripts that would be used in the future and give them to them. He didn't have to worry about anything else after that. In the era without photocopiers and printers, the only way to do it was to copy it by hand. Moreover, he could only copy it by himself. It wasn't even possible to find someone to write it for him. Writing with a brush was much more tiring than writing with a pencil or a ballpoint pen. Long masterpieces like Journey to the West and Legend of the White Snake weren't within Li Yi's consideration for the time being. Strange Stories from a Chinese studio was more suitable. The story wasn't long, but the content was very attractive. There were many classic stories in it, which was more than enough to support a brothel. He would write a few stories every day. If he was tired from copying, he would walk in the yard and do some less intense movements. Rui would occasionally come over to give him some pointers. Of course, he had never neglected his true chi physiotherapy every day. His body recovered surprisingly fast. It was almost the middle of November now. If he maintained this speed, his body would be fully recovered before the end of the year. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my father's death. Rui and I have to go back to the stockade village to pay our respects. My husband hasn't recovered yet, so you should stay here. I'll ask Uncle Fong to come over tomorrow, Lu Rui said to Li Yi while eating. Li Yi was stunned for a moment and then said, although I haven't recovered yet, it's okay to walk a bit more. I'll go back with you. As the son-in-law, he should go back and pay his respects on the anniversary of his father-in-law's death. Moreover, he had been hiding in such a small place all day long. He was afraid that before his old injury recovered, he would get a new one. He hadn't been back to the Willow Leaf Village for a long time. It was good to go back and have a look. The mountain road is hard to walk on. Let me and Rui go, Lu Rui said, looking at him. I'm really fine. Take a look if you don't believe me. While Rui was still doubtful about his physical condition, Li Yi had already stood up, patted his chest, twisted his waist, and quickly walked around the house, indicating that the mountain path was nothing to him. Seeing Li Yi's insistence, Lu Rui could only nod helplessly. Young master, aren't you going to eat? Xiao Huan asked doubtfully when she saw that Li Yi did not sit down again after standing up. There was still a lot of food left in his bowl. Oh, wait a minute, I think I twisted my waist just now. Li Yi put one hand on his waist and said awkwardly. It was better not to be too complacent, otherwise, it was easy to twist his waist. This time, Rui massaged him for a long time with her unique method, and the bursts of pain gradually disappeared. He had a beautiful dream. The next morning, he closed the shop and rented a carriage as usual. He got off at the foot of the Green Willow Mountain and went straight to the Willow Leaf Village along the mountain road. The process of paying respects to his father-in-law was very simple. They didn't invite a Taoist priest to open a Taoist temple, nor did they invite a monk to chant sutras. The two sisters cleaned up the weeds around the grave, burned some paper money, and poured a jar of liquor produced by Rui workshop into the soil in front of the grave. Li also went forward and kowtowed respectfully. Then he went back with Xiao Huan, while his sister Rui had to stay there for a while. When they passed through the village, most of the people from the Lu family would come over and ask about it eagerly. When he was in Rui workshop, they would occasionally bring some things to have a look, put down the things, ask a few questions, stay for a short while, and then get up and leave. No one would mention the previous grievances now. At least on the surface, it looked like a beautiful scene of harmonious neighbors. Young master, are you feeling better? When they walked somewhere in the village, a white-haired old man ran out of the yard. Haha, it's not a big problem now. Uncle Han had indirectly saved Li Yi's life. When he saw him, the smile on Li Yi's face was much warmer than before. That's good, that's good. Hearing that, The wrinkles on Uncle Han's face bloomed like flowers. The young master and miss had always helped him a lot, and the rice, noodles, meat, and vegetables at home had never been cut off. A few days ago, Miss came home and left a lot of money. He wanted to refuse, but Miss was determined, so he had to accept it. Knowing that the little things he made last time had helped the young master, he had always been indebted to them. Knowing that he could do something for the young master and miss, he felt very happy. "Boy Han, is my chair fixed?" An old voice suddenly came from behind. Li looked back and saw an old man with a cane and a hunched body walking slowly towards him. "Second uncle." Xiaohuan hurriedly greeted him. In the Willow Leaf village, there was only one person who could call Uncle Han this way. Except for the old but strong second uncle, no one else had this qualification. "Second uncle." Uncle Han smiled and said, "It's fixed. I'll send it to you today." Second uncle nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Li Yi. He smacked his lips and shook his head, saying, "It's good to be a scholar, but your physique is too weak. To think that your great-grandfather was skilled in both literature and martial arts." After a while, the old man ended his long speech and patted Li Yi's shoulder, saying, "In the future, you still need to spend more time practicing martial arts. Don't let any Tom, Dick, or Harry bully you. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your wife." After such a warning, the old man waved his hand and slowly walked away. Looking at the old man pausing a few steps, his body was hunched. No matter how you looked at it, it seemed that half of his foot was already in the ground. It was really hard to imagine how he picked up a solid rocking chair with one hand last time. On the way back, Li Yi curiously asked the little servant girl, "Did second uncle know martial arts when he was young?" "I don't know." The little servant girl shook her head adorably. "When Xiaohuan and Miss were young, second uncle was like this." The childhood that Xiaohuan mentioned was about 10 years ago. Li Yi couldn't help but be amazed in his heart. Second uncle's vitality was really tenacious. The woman with a bucket waist stood at the door of her house, watching Li Yi and Xiaohuan walk into the courtyard. Her expression was extremely complicated. Wu Ying was dead. He kidnapped the son-in-law of Rui's family and wanted to snatch the formula of Rui's due. But in the end, he died in an internal fight with the other villains. She had clearly seen Wu Ying's evil intentions before, but she didn't warn him in time. She didn't expect that he actually did that kind of thing. Wu Ying's parents died when he was young. Ever since he was young, she had taken care of this nephew a lot. When she learned of his death, her feelings were indescribably complicated. This kind of complicated feeling was even clearer when she saw Li Yi. Although he deserved it, but after all, he was still her nephew. After a long time, second Aunt Wu sighed and turned to walk back into the house. At the same time, in the Anxi County Yamen, Mingzi frowned as she read an official document from the Ministry of Justice. Chapter 224. Bone-paring knife Ju Tu Fu. Death rush Cui Yen. Evil man Zhengji. What are these people planning by gathering in Qing Prefecture? Mingzhu's brows furrowed slightly as she murmured. The names she mentioned were all infamous in Jianghu. They despised the government, disregarded the law, and regarded human life as nothing more than grass. However, their martial arts were extremely high, and it was difficult to trace them. Wanting to capture them and bring them to justice was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Moreover, the imperial court and the Jianghu had always maintained a delicate balance. It was not to say that they did not interfere with each other, but as long as these people did not raise flags to rebel or do some extremely evil things, the imperial court would not put in any effort to encircle and suppress them. As for the disputes in the Jianghu, the local authorities actually turned a blind eye. However, in recent days, countless people from the Jianghu and underworld had gathered in Qing Prefecture. Before they had even entered the city, they had all disappeared. She would never believe that they did not have any ulterior motives. She had practiced martial arts since she was young, and was no stranger to the matters of the Jianghu. These people were extremely powerful. If they really gathered together and caused trouble, they would probably have to mobilize the garrison in the prefectural city to quell it. In the next few days, Have your subordinates keep a close eye on their areas of jurisdiction. If there is anything out of the ordinary, report to me immediately, she said lightly as she put down the document in her hand. Yes, boss, I will go and remind them now. Liu Yi, who had been promoted to the head captain of the 3rd Squad of Bailiffs, had a solemn expression. He saluted her and immediately retreated. Only Mingzu and a scribe were left in the hall. Those people would not have gathered here for no reason. They had to figure out their intentions. In fact, the imperial court had always been worried about people like them, especially when it came to such a large-scale event. So they paid even more attention to it. Mingzu had a thoughtful expression. After a moment she spoke again. Investigate the purpose of those people and report to me as soon as possible. Your Highness, do not worry. I will do it immediately. When the young scribe heard this, he stood up, bowed, and quickly disappeared. 10 miles away from the prefectural city, at a roadside tea house beside the official road. Pa, I have roamed the pugilistic world for so long, but I have never tasted such disgusting tea. Beside a table by the roadside, a bald man with grease stains on his face spat out the tea in his mouth. Waiter, get your ass over here. After hearing the man's thunderous voice, the shop assistant with a white towel on his shoulder hurriedly ran over and asked with a face full of smiles, What can I do for you, sir? The bald man smashed the teapot on the table and said angrily, Change a pot of good tea for me. If you still use that kind of trash to fool me, I will smash your broken tea house. Sir, this is already our most. The waiter explained helplessly. However, he saw the man's face turn fierce, and he immediately swallowed the rest of his words. This tea house was located in the wilderness. Other than the passers-by and merchants, there were also many Jianghu people. The waiter had been serving tea here for some time, and knew their temperament. If they did not agree with each other, they would smash this small tea house. It was definitely not just to scare him. Sir, please wait a moment. I will immediately change it for you. The waiter smiled apologetically as he said this. This time, he would probably have to bring out the best tea that the shopkeeper had kept hidden. Otherwise, he might not be able to get past this evil man. There were many passers-by resting in the tea house. Seeing this, many people frowned. However, it was best not to cause trouble when they were outside. Moreover, the bald man did not seem to be someone to be trifled with. Even if they were angry, they did not dare to say anything. The waiter quickly brought out a pot of good tea. This time, the bald man did not make things difficult for him. He scolded, You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. After finishing the tea, he stood up and walked outside. The waiter's eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly chased after him. Sir, please wait a moment. What else do you want? The bald man turned around and glared at him. Sir, you haven't paid for the tea. The waiter said timidly. Haha. The bald man laughed a few times. He pulled out 2 boning knives from his back and stabbed them into the wooden table. The tips of the knives pierced through the table. The evil man held the handles and said, What did you just say? I didn't hear it clearly. Say it again? No, it's nothing. Sir, please take care. The tip of the knives was suffused with a cold light. The waiter shivered and immediately hid far away. He no longer dared to mention the tea money. The bald man pulled out the boning knives and left after laughing a few times. Inside the tea house, a young man looked at his companion with dissatisfaction and asked, Why did you stop me just now? The man beside him smiled bitterly and said, Junior brother, being outside is not like being in the sect. You have to be careful. Did you see the 2 boning knives just now? If I'm not wrong, that person is. After hearing the man's words, the young man's expression softened a little. However, he still glared fiercely in the direction that the evil man had left. A good martial arts world has been turned into a mess by this kind of person. Hateful, really hateful. Should junior brother, lower your voice. Don't let others hear you. It hasn't been peaceful here these past few days. The man lowered his voice so that others could no longer hear him. On a mountain road somewhere, a man with thin cheeks and a gloomy expression clapped his hands and said coldly, With only this much ability, you still want to learn how to rob others? What kind of mountain bandits are you? Go be a ghost. On the ground in front of him were two famous bandits. However, their necks were twisted strangely to one side. Their faces were filled with fear, and they had stopped breathing long ago. With two bangs, the man kicked the two corpses to the side of the precipice. He looked left and right before his figure quickly disappeared on the mountain road. In another place, beside a stream, a figure hidden in a thicket looked at the women washing clothes by the stream with a lustful gaze. His eyes flickered with light. After a moment, the glimmer of light receded. Only a regretful voice could be heard. How can a village girl from the mountains compare to the young ladies of the city? Forget it, let's get down to business first. The short and stout dwarf with a fat head and big ears looked at the stream again, before reluctantly withdrawing his gaze. He turned and walked deeper into the forest. For the ordinary people of Anchi County, the past few days were extremely ordinary winter days. The gloomy weather lasted for a few days. Countless people were looking forward to the early arrival of the first snow of this winter. Auspicious snow indicated a bumper harvest in the coming year, and only then would they have a good harvest in the coming year. After experiencing a drought, they couldn't bear any more torment. However, it was not easy for the bailiffs and citizens of the government and county government. Within the prefectural city, everyone was on high alert. They followed the orders of their superiors and did their best to search for suspicious people within the city. They were extremely cautious. The people of the Jianghu near Qing prefecture also had the same feeling. Occasionally, they would hear some news and rumors from remote tea houses and restaurants. They could faintly feel that Qing prefecture would not be peaceful in the next few days. The isolated Willow Leaf village was as quiet and peaceful as ever. After Sister Rui paid her respects to her father, she stayed in the village for a day. The next day, she returned to the prefectural city with Li Yi. Second uncle's words make sense. My husband should practice more martial arts, Lu Rui said with a smile after hearing Li Yi tell her about yesterday's events. Li Yi curled his lips. It was easy for an old man to say that. He had practiced martial arts often, but he had not made much progress. Until now, he had not felt the existence of Jinqi. He was also very helpless about this. Rui, take brother-in-law and Xiaohuan back to the city first. I have forgotten something and need to return to the village. On the way down the mountain, Lu Rui suddenly said when they were almost halfway down. Lu Rui turned her head, looked at her, and nodded. Seeing the three figures disappear at a corner of the mountain path, Lu Rui turned around and looked at a low slope that they had just passed. Chapter 225. There were low slopes on both sides of the mountain path. Trees were overgrown, and weeds were growing wildly. When Lu Rui looked over, she saw a mountain rabbit running out of the grass that was half the height of a person. It entered the wild grass on the other side and disappeared in a flash. Thinking back to the scene he had just seen, a figure hiding in the deep grass sighed in his heart. The Lu sisters are actually such peerless beauties. If they were killed by those rough people, wouldn't it be a pity? Even the little servant girls beside them are quite good-looking. Looking at their eyebrows, they are also virgins. They are much better than those ordinary women. The figure secretly sighed in his heart. He had been picking flowers for many years, but he had never seen such a beautiful woman. He couldn't help but start to doubt his life. Why did he meet all those ordinary women? The sound of footsteps gradually faded away. He made up his mind. He couldn't let these beauties be defiled by those people. At the very least, he had to let them first. Just as this thought emerged in his mind, he was suddenly shocked. He slowly raised his head, and when he looked at the mountain path again, he couldn't see a single figure. That trace of shock gradually turned into doubt. Strange. He clearly had a strange feeling just now, as if he had encountered a crisis. It was a moment of life and death, and it made his hair stand on end. But in the next moment, that feeling completely disappeared. If I want to be ahead of them, it looks like I have to make my move tonight. He muttered to himself and stood up from the grass. The weeds could only reach a person's waist, but they didn't reach his neck. At this moment, he could clearly see the figure's appearance. He had a fat head and big ears, and he was short. It was an ugly dwarf. Who are you? At this moment, a cold voice came from behind him. The dwarf's body froze for a moment, and his expression changed drastically. He fiercely swung his sleeves, and a cloud of pink smoke shot out from his sleeves, spreading in the direction of the voice. At the same time, he skillfully retracted his hands into his sleeves. When he stretched them out again, there were two sharp blades in his hands. He pierced through the smoke and stabbed forward. In the next moment, the smoke rolled back, and the dwarf's body flew backward. He spat out blood in the air, and fell heavily on the mountain path. "Eldest miss, what's wrong?" Not far ahead, Old Fong had just come out of the stockade village, and was about to descend the mountain to take a look around the prefectural city. Halfway there, he saw a figure fly out from the low slope and land at his feet. He raised his head, and looked at the young miss, who was walking towards him with a dazed expression. In the northern district of the prefectural city of Qing, and many lowly commoners lived there. Bandits and robbers had always run amok. It was one of the few places in the city where evil was hidden. At this moment, there were many people gathered in a dark house. Most of them were burly and carried weapons with them. Their bodies exuded a faint murderous aura, which was incomparably terrifying. If an ordinary person accidentally barged in, they would probably be so frightened that they would immediately fall to the ground. "Why isn't that shorty here yet?" A bald man in the middle glanced at the crowd and asked impatiently. Many of them had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Other than the boning knife Zhu Tufu, there were not many people present who dared to use the term shorty to describe that person. Not only that, even words like short, dwarf, and even short were taboo in front of that person. If they accidentally offended him, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. After all, other than being lustful, that person was also famous for his bad temper in the martial arts world. Once, someone had been brutally killed by him because they had mocked his physique. Even they shuddered when they thought of the tragic scene. Forget it, there's no need to wait for him. That dwarf has probably already died on a woman's belly. Beside the bald man, a middle-aged man with a thin face and a gloomy expression said mockingly. He turned his head to look at the other burly man. "Brother Zhou, was my good-for-nothing brother really captured by that girl surnamed Liu?" The burly man nodded and said in a deep voice, "If Brother Cui doesn't believe me, you can go out and ask around. In the past 2 years, how many of our brothers in the Green Forest have fallen to that woman's hands? Come to think of it, those brothers have no grudge against her. But that woman just won't let them go. She would rather become the minions of the government. My brother who also fell to her hands. I'm afraid that his head will soon roll to the ground. I say, Brother Zhou, are you a man or not? A woman can actually make you so afraid, and you even need these brothers to come and help." The bald man looked at the burly man with disdain and said, "It's just a woman. I, your father, will let her win with only one hand. Oh, since you Zhu Tufu look down on women so much, why don't you spar with me?" A feminine voice came from the crowd, and everyone made way for her. A skinny woman with a scar on her face walked out from the crowd. Zhu Tufu originally wanted to agree, but when he saw that it was this woman who spoke, he immediately swallowed the words he was about to say and said with an embarrassed smile, "The third lady is a heroine among women, so of course she is not one of them. This old Zhu admires you very much, but as for the spar, let's forget about it." If it was any other woman, he would have already taken out his 2 boning knives and charged at her. The infamous Zhu Tufu was not like the shorty, who knew how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. However, even though the person in front of him was a woman, there was probably not a single person present who treated her as a woman. This woman was abandoned by her fiancé, and on the night of the man's wedding, she beheaded the newlyweds in front of all their friends and relatives. She swore to kill all the unfaithful men in the world. Over the years, the number of men who died by her hands was not small. Even someone as fierce as Zhu Tufu felt a little scared when he saw her. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, the burly man laughed and said, "We are all brothers, so let's not hurt each other. I'm sure that since everyone is here, they all have some grudges against that woman. What we should do now is what we need to discuss. What's there to discuss? There are so many of us. Even if that woman is a grandmaster, she will die on the spot. Senior Han's only son has also been captured by that woman and handed over to the authorities. Senior has already said that whoever can take that woman's head will be accepted by Senior Han as his disciple. This is a rare opportunity. Also, Minister Zhao of Chuzhou has also said that whoever can capture that woman will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver. Hearing the angry chatter of the crowd, even the instigator of this matter, the burly man, did not expect this. He had only spread the news to gather some people who had a grudge against that woman to act together to increase their chances of success. But he did not expect so many people to respond. That woman had offended almost half of the heroes in the Jianghu near Qing and prefecture. Chapter 226. Just thinking about it, if these people's target was him, the burly man felt a chill run down his spine. That was practically a death sentence. That Senior Han had become famous 20 years ago. At that time, his martial arts were already top-notch. Now he was probably even more unfathomable. Even if he hadn't stepped into the Grandmaster realm, he wasn't far from it. If one could become his disciple and receive his guidance, their martial arts cultivation would definitely improve. Regardless of whether or not they had any grudges with that woman, just this one condition was enough to make countless people scramble like ducks. Zhao Yuanwei could be considered half a person of Jianghu. His family was extremely wealthy, and there weren't many people who would sit still for 1,000 taels of silver to buy that woman. He had originally only wanted to gather some people to avenge his brother, but now that things had developed to this point, it had long since gotten out of his control. At this point, apart from his group of people, who knew how many people were eyeing that woman, with such a large commotion, it was impossible to hide from the authorities. Those who could accept this kind of transaction, or who had a grudge with that woman, were definitely not clean. If this dragged on for too long, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. I have to make my move as soon as possible to avoid long nights of dreams. In an instant, the burly man had already made his decision. On the mountain path, Fong grabbed the midget's collar and lifted him up, fiercely asking, "Speak. What kind of evil plan do you have? Who sent you?" After experiencing the matter of the young master being kidnapped last time, Fong hated this kind of person to the extreme. This guy was lying in ambush on the side of the road. He definitely wanted to harm the young master. If it wasn't for the young miss, the young master might have really fallen into this guy's trap. Since I've fallen into your hands, if you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. The midget glanced at Fong and coldly snorted. He had an illustrious reputation in Jianghu. These years, he had done all sorts of evil deeds. Naturally, he would think of what would happen if he fell into the hands of the authorities. They were all hot-blooded men. Even if their heads fell off, they would still be heroes in their next life. You do have some guts. Upon hearing this, Fong didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and turned to look at Lu Rui. "Eldest miss, leave this matter to me. I want to see how long this guy can keep his mouth shut." He sneered at the dwarf, grabbed him by the neck, and walked deeper into the bushes. Some time ago, he had learned many tricks in the yamen. Unfortunately, he had never had the chance to try them out. This time, the shorty was really lucky. Of course, that kind of brutal and bloody scene could not be seen by the eldest Mississippi. Soon enough, the dwarf's voice came from the depths of the bushes. "Pa, if you have any tricks up your sleeves, just use them. If I shout, I'll call you Grandpa. Grandpa, spare me. I'll tell you everything." After a while, Fong carried the unconscious dwarf out of the bushes and casually threw him on the ground. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. "Young miss." He threw the midget down and looked at Lu Rui. He opened his mouth and only spoke after a long time. "This is bad." As he walked on the streets of the prefectural city, Li noticed that there were more bailiffs patrolling the streets than usual. It seemed that every district had increased their manpower. These bailiffs naturally recognized him. They came over and greeted him respectfully, "Magistrate." They looked a little tired. Did something big happen in the prefectural city these 2 days? Li looked at one of the bailiffs and asked in confusion. The bailiff immediately replied, Your Excellency, I'm not too sure either. It's just that the higher-ups have ordered us to be on guard for the next few days. After asking a few more questions, Li did not get any answers. He waved his hand and signaled for the bailiffs to continue patrolling. He was still on sick leave and could not be bothered with so many things. He believed that Her Highness would take care of these matters. Out of the way! Out of the way! Just as the three of them were about to reach the entrance of Rui Lane, there was a sudden commotion on the street in front of them. A man ran over recklessly. Li took a closer look. This man was the one who was arrested and sent to the yamen for injuring someone. He was later released because of his filial piety. His name seemed to be Wu Er. Wu Er was carrying another person on his back, and the bailiff uniform he was wearing was stained with blood. Li was stunned for a moment, but that Wu Er had already rushed past him and ran straight into the Huichun Hall not far away. Rui, bring Xiaohuan back first. I'll go take a look. Li did not see clearly who was wearing the bailiff uniform, but he was sure that it was his subordinate. He frowned and informed Rui before quickly walking over. Lu Rui and Xiaohuan did not return to Rui Lane. They watched as he hurriedly left and followed. When Li arrived at Huichun Hall, other than Wu Er, the two bailiffs who were patrolling earlier were also inside. Dainyu, what happened to you? Looking at Dainyu, who was lying on the ground with a pale face and a few wounds that were still bleeding, the expressions on the two men's faces were both shocked and angry. Let's not talk about this first. Wu Er quickly replied. Treating the wounds is more important. No, there are too many wounds on his body. We can't stop the bleeding. Dr. Chen's face was full of anxiety. He had already poured different kinds of hemostatic medicine on the wounds, but the man was still bleeding. If this continued, it would not be long before he lost a lot of blood. Even the gods could not save him. Li Yi had just walked into Huichun Hall and happened to hear Dr. Chen's words. Just as he was about to quickly walk over, a figure behind him was faster than him. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared beside Dainyu and reached out to poke him twice. You! Dr. Chen was shocked when he saw the woman who suddenly appeared and randomly poked the patient's body. He was about to reprimand her when his eyes suddenly widened, and he swallowed his words. At this moment, on the man lying on the ground, the bleeding wounds had stopped. Although there were still traces of blood seeping out, it was much better than before. I can at most seal his acupuncture points for 15 minutes. You better think of a way to save him during this time. Lu Rui stood up and said to Dr. Chen, I can only apply some hemostatic medicine and bandage his wound. As for whether he can survive, it will depend on his luck. Dr. Chen said honestly. When Li Yi heard this, he immediately ordered the servant girl beside him. Xiaohuan, go to the shop and bring my small medicine box over. The servant girl knew that the situation was urgent. She responded and quickly ran out. Am I going to die? Dainyu, who had already woken up, said with a trembling voice. A trace of despair appeared on his face. When he heard Dr. Chen's words, the constable next to him revealed a sorrowful expression. He bent down and held Dainya's hand tightly. He said, Brother Dainyu, don't worry. If you die, I will take care of Auntie until she dies. Good brother. Dainya's face revealed a grateful expression. Don't worry about my nephew. I will take care of him until he grows up. The constable continued. The area that Dainyu was patrolling today should have been him. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to be closer to home and swap places with Dainyu, he would have been the one lying here. As for sister-in-law, I will help you take good care of her. Brother Dainyu, you can go in peace. The constable's heart was filled with sorrow, and he held Dainya's hand even tighter. Dainya's pale face suddenly changed. He turned and grabbed Dr. Chen's arm and said with a trembling voice, Doctor, save me. I don't want to die. Chapter 227. Dr. Chen had a helpless look on his face. If it was any other injury, it would be fine. However, this kind of bleeding wound was the most difficult to deal with. He could only do his best. Even on the battlefield, this kind of minor injury would only be treated with a simple bandage. If the injury was too serious, he could only add a knife to help the patient. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen's expression and suddenly had a bad premonition from the bottom of his heart. Why could he faintly feel the same aura from this old doctor as the bald man with the bone-paring knife? It was as if the bald man would stab him a few times in the next moment. "Young master, the medicine box is here." Xiao Huan ran in with a wooden box panting and handed it to Li Yi. The servant girl knew what was in the box. Other than some commonly used medicine, there was wine and needles. However, she had never seen the young master use them before. "Wait." Seeing that Dr. Chen was about to pour the unknown powder on Daniel's wound, Li Yi quickly walked over. "County Lieutenant." Dr. Chen turned around and looked at him with a face full of doubt. This man's injury could not be delayed any longer. Li Yi opened the wooden box and took out the things inside. He said, "Let me deal with the wound." Dr. Chen looked doubtful. Although this county magistrate Li knew Lord Lu, even if Lord Lu came here personally, he wouldn't be able to cure this kind of injury. Where did this young magistrate's confidence come from? "Lord." Daniel was stunned for a moment and said hesitantly. This old doctor looked a little unreliable, but in terms of medical skills, he should be better than the county lieutenant, right? "Do you trust me?" Li Yi looked up at Daniel and asked. Daniel and Li Yi looked at each other. It was as if he saw the county lieutenant, who was full of vigor in the court again. Daniel's heart calmed down a little. He gritted his teeth and said, "I trust you." Seeing that the injured person also said so, Dr. Chen did not say anything else. Even if he dealt with it himself, he only had less than 50% confidence. Since the county lieutenant was willing to take this risk, he was happy to do it. "It might hurt a little. Bear with it." Li Yi took out a small bottle of disinfectant. The wound on Daniel's body needed to be stitched up. In order to prevent the wound from getting infected, he had to disinfect it before stitching it up. As if he was trying his best to stay awake, Daniel smiled and said, "I, Daniel, don't have any other abilities, but I can still endure this pain." Roar. Li Yi used a clean cloth that had been boiled and dipped in alcohol to help him clean the area around the wound. The moment he touched the wound, Daniel screamed. In later generations, iodophor was commonly used to disinfect because alcohol was too stimulating to the human body. Ordinary people could not tolerate it. That feeling might be even more stimulating than directly sprinkling salt on the wound. Li Yi glanced at him and continued what he was doing. If it wasn't for Daniel's powerful knockout drug, he might not even have the chance to stand here. This time, he had a chance to repay him. Hiss. Ah. Roar. When Li Yi was disinfecting his wound, Daniel did not look like a seriously injured person at all. He was full of energy and kept screaming. After a while, Li Yi finally stopped what he was doing. He turned to look at Lu Rui and asked, "Is there any way to make him calm down temporarily?" He was also a person who cared about his reputation. If this guy kept screaming while lying on the ground, people who did not know better would think that he did something to him. Yes. Lu Rui's answer was very straightforward. She chopped the back of Daniel's head with her hand, and the world finally became quiet. Dr. Chen and the two constables who were supporting Daniel saw this, and their mouths twitched at the same time. As expected of Mississippi Lu, this trick was very effective. Not only did Daniel stop screaming when he disinfected the wound with alcohol, even when he started to stitch the wound with catgut, Daniel seemed to be asleep and did not have any reaction. Except for Li Yi, everyone had a reaction. Xiao Huan did not know what the needles and thread in the box were used for before, but now she knew. Seeing her son-in-law stitch the man's wound as if he was sewing clothes, her face was already pale with fear. She covered her eyes and did not dare to watch anymore. As for the apprentice in the medical center who was not mentally strong enough, he ran to the backyard when Li Yi stitched the first stitch. He leaned against the wall and vomited. The scene just now had a huge impact on him. He would not be able to have any good dreams for the next few nights. The man who carried Daniel here, Wu Er, also felt his stomach churn when he saw this. Looking at the county magistrate who continued to stitch the wound calmly, the expression in his eyes immediately changed. Dr. Chun had been a doctor for decades, and the two constables had seen some big scenes because of their profession. Naturally, they would not be so embarrassed, but their expressions were still not normal. County magistrate this, Dr. Chun, who had never seen such a method, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He did not dare to stop it, so he spoke with a trembling voice. Just as he said a few words, Li waved his hand and said, "Be quiet, don't talk, I'll take responsibility if anything happens." He was fully focused at this moment, and with the help of the library in his mind, he could ensure that his hands would not make any mistakes. Any external interference would have a significant impact on him. Lu Rui stood beside him and watched as the wound was stitched up. She clenched her fists tightly, and her face was slightly pale, but she did not look away. After the wound was stitched up, Li took out the sterilized gauze from the box and bandaged Dinyo's wound before standing up. Dr. Chun should know what to do next. A quarter of an hour had already passed, but there was no more blood flowing out of the stitched wound. Dr. Chen's face revealed a shocked expression. At this moment, he finally understood why the imperial physician, Lord Lu, was so polite to this young county officer. This was a method of stitching wounds that he had never seen before. If all the doctors in the world could learn it, countless lives would be saved, especially on the battlefield, and countless soldiers would benefit from it. Dr. Chen did not dare to think about it. The next moment his face turned solemn, and he solemnly bowed to Li Yi and said, "May I be so bold as to ask County Magistrate to spread this method to the world? The people of the Jing Kingdom will remember your kindness for generations to come." The doctors in this era, regardless of their medical skills, all had noble sentiments. They always thought about the people. Imperial physician Lu was like that, and now Dr. Chun was also like that. Li Yi waved his hand. This matter was not urgent. He had to find out how Dinyo got injured first. This was in Qing'an Prefectural City, and someone actually dared to attack a constable. In the future, it would be a felony of assaulting a police officer. It was obvious that the person did not respect the county magistrate. When he raised his hand, he found that it was blood red. He did not have sterile gloves, and he only sterilized it. When he stitched up the wound, there was naturally a lot of blood on it. When he was concentrating, he did not notice anything. Now that he came back to his senses, he saw that both of his hands were bloody, and a smell of blood hit his face. Li suddenly felt his stomach churning, and his head became dizzy. "What's wrong with you?" Lu Rui was the first to notice his abnormality. Just as he opened his mouth, he saw Dr. Chen's body shake a few times, and he fell straight back. Chapter 228. After the wound was stitched up, Danyu, who was no longer in any danger, was temporarily placed in the medical center. Lu Rui's hand chop was not light. Half an hour had passed, but he still had not woken up. No matter what, Dinyo was finally out of danger. Before Li Yi could open his mouth to ask, the constable who was on good terms with Dinyo looked at Wu Er and asked, "Who hurt Dinyo? Where is the murderer now?" Danyu was injured because of him, so he naturally could not ignore this matter. Dr. Chun brought a basin of clean water, and Li Yi asked Xiao Huan to fetch a piece of soap from the shop to wash the blood on his hands. When Wu Er spoke, he raised his head and listened. "It was bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu," Wu Er said. "What Tufu?" The two bailiffs had clearly not heard of this name, and a trace of confusion appeared on their faces. The two were not people of Jianghu, so it was normal that they had not heard of Zhu Tufu. Wu Er was not surprised and explained, "Zhu Tufu is a famous villain in the underworld, and he has a bad reputation in the underworld." He dared not say that in the entire Jianghu, but in the territory of Qing'an Prefecture, there were not many people in Jianghu who did not know of bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu. What bone-paring knife or butcher knife? This nickname is too ugly. As Li Yi was thinking about this, he noticed that when Wu Er mentioned Zhu Tufu, the corner of Lu Rui's mouth twitched. He wiped his hands clean, stood up, and asked Lu Rui, "You or that Zhu Tufu, who is more powerful?" Lu Rui looked at him indifferently, and did not speak, as if he did not care to answer. Li suddenly understood. Compared to his sister-in-law, that Zhu Tufu was far from enough. The bailiff who spoke just now gritted his teeth and said, "Who cares about him? Daniel has no grudge against him. But he was so ruthless. Where is he now? I will go back to the government office and call a few more brothers. We must arrest him." "Absolutely not." Hearing this, Wu Er waved his hand and said, "That Zhu Tufu is one of the top experts in the Green Forest. He came to Qing and to take the life of the woman from the willow leaf stockade. He has gathered a large group of Green Forest experts around him. You must not act rashly." Wu Er himself could be considered half a man of Jianghu, so he knew very well how powerful those people were when they gathered together. Not to mention a few constables, even all the local government laborers would not be a match for them. The only reason that the injured constable was still alive was probably because Zhu Tufu had some misgivings and did not dare to kill anyone in the prefectural city. Even so, if it were not for the fact that he happened to see the constable named Daniel when those people left, he would have lost his life due to excessive blood loss. Wu Er, who was busy stopping the two bailiffs, didn't notice that after he said those words, the beautiful woman and the county lieutenant's expressions turned extremely unsightly. "What did you say?" Lu Rui flashed and appeared in front of Wu Er. She stared at him and asked, "What woman from the Willow Leaf village?" Wu Er was stunned for a moment and did not know what was going on. Could it be that this young lady also had a grudge against that woman? At this moment, there was no time for him to think too much. Li Yi had already walked over with quick steps and said with a serious face, "What do you know about this matter? Tell me everything." "Okay." Wu Er was very grateful to the county lieutenant, who he was indebted to. After a moment of daze, he organized his thoughts and told him everything he knew, regardless of whether it was important or not. "The county lieutenant has just been in office, so you may not know, but in the past 2 years, many people from the underworld who were wanted by the government have been captured in Qing Prefecture." Wu Er had 2 brothers in his family. The elder brother was somewhat skilled in martial arts and had traveled the martial world for many people. Naturally, he knew some things about Jianghu. When he came back this time, he talked with Wu Er about some things. After capturing so many people from the underworld, the woman must have offended many people. Senior Han is a famous martial artist and only has 1 son. Because he committed a murder, he is also wanted by the government. After he escaped to Qing Prefecture, he was captured by the woman and handed over to the government. This time, Senior Han spread the word that if anyone could take the woman's head, he would take that person as his disciple. Also, Officer Zhao of Chuzhou, although I don't know what kind of grudge he has with the woman, he also put 1,000 taels of silver on his head. Listening to Wu Er's story, Lu Rui's face gradually darkened. She knew very well what her sister had done in the past 2 years. If it wasn't for capturing these wanted criminals and exchanging them for money and food, the family would have run out of food a long time ago. They wouldn't have been able to survive until she kidnapped Li Yi. In the past 2 years, her sister would often go out for a few days. When she came back, she would occasionally have some scars on her body. She would keep some of the rice and food she received from the government and distribute most of it to the family. If it wasn't for this, who knew how many people would have died during the 2 years of famine? And the thing that she had been worried about had finally happened. "How many people are there?" Li looked at Wu Er and asked in a low voice. Wu Er thought for a moment and said, "With Bone-Paring Knife Zhu Tufu and Death Rush Cui Yen as the leaders, the number of people from the underworld is the highest. There are about 30 of them." Although Senior Han and Officer Zhao also attracted many people, most of them acted alone. "Although there are more people, I heard that the woman is very skilled in martial arts and is much less of a threat than the former." In the end, Wu Er had only heard about it. This was all that his brother had revealed to him. "Senior Han, Officer Zhao, are these the so-called heroes of the martial arts world?" Li said in a low voice. When he turned around to look, Lu Rui had disappeared without him noticing. Wu Er snorted and said, Although Zhu Tufu and Cui Yan are skilled in martial arts, they are not heroes. In the eyes of true heroes of the martial arts world, they are just a group of powerful bandits. Although Senior Han loves his son, he can't distinguish between good and evil. I'm afraid that in the future, he will be laughed at by countless people. As for Officer Zhao, I heard that he has always been in close contact with these people. I don't know how many dirty tricks he used to build up his family business today. Wu Er's face was full of resentment, and his words were full of disdain for these people. However, Li Yi was no longer concerned about these things. Li Yi turned around and patted the constable's shoulder as he said, Wei Chong, please take this lady to the county government office. I'll leave her safety in your hands. Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely protect this young lady. The constable named Wei Chong immediately bowed and said, Young master, Xiao Huan opened her mouth with a pale face. Li Yi touched her head and said with a smile, Be good and listen to the young master. Stay in the government office, and don't run around. I will come to pick you up after I finish this matter. I'll be counting on you. Li Yi glanced at the constable again, before turning around and leaving. Young master. Xiao Huan anxiously wanted to chase after him, but the constable was already in front of her. Constable Wei touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, Young lady, please listen to the county lieutenant and follow me back to the government office. Lao Si, you can't die. If you die like this, how are we going to live? In the Willow Leaf Village, a woman in coarse clothes knelt on the ground and wailed. In front of her, a middle-aged man was lying on the ground. His face was pale, and there was a trace of blood on the clothes on his chest. The 7 or 8-year-old naughty boy stood there in a daze. He didn't know what to do with the scene in front of him. After the woman pinched his thigh, he immediately shriveled up and wailed. Seeing this, the onlookers looked at each other. They had just arrived when they heard the noise, and didn't know what had happened. Fourth uncle is only slightly injured. He won't die. Lu Rui lowered her head and said to her, If it weren't for you, would Lao Si be beaten up like this? It would have been better if Lu Rui hadn't opened her mouth. The moment she opened her mouth, the woman immediately glared at her and said, You have offended those Jianghu people. Now they want to kill you. Even fourth sister has suffered an unexpected calamity. Those people kill without batting an eye. When the time comes, even we will be buried with you. We won't be able to live on anymore. Not long after the woman finished speaking, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Lao Si's wife, what did you say? What Jianghu people? What is all this fighting and killing? Say something. Lao Si's wife's words were very frightening. What did she mean by kill? And be buried with you? People who didn't know the inside story trembled and urged her. You can ask her. The woman stretched out her finger and pointed at Lu Rui, saying, She just had to provoke those murderous geniuses. Great. Now she's dragging our entire stronghold down with her. If it wasn't for the fact that fourth brother's hands and feet were injured, and he still had some martial arts left, I'm afraid he would have abandoned us mother and son to die first. In any case, I can't stay in this stronghold anymore. You can stay if you want, but don't blame me for not warning you. The woman helped the middle-aged man up from the ground and walked back to their house. Before they left, she even kicked the naughty child beside her and scolded. What are you waiting for? Go home and pack your things to escape. Lao Si's wife's words became more and more terrifying. Everyone was shocked and suspicious. After glancing at Lu Rui, they hurriedly chased after Lao Si's family. Lao Si's family, don't be anxious. Speak clearly. That's right. Don't scare us. What exactly happened? Tell us. We'll think of a solution together. Eldest young mistress. Fong turned to look at Lu Rui. He wanted to say something but stopped. Lu Rui's expression did not change. She looked at Lao Si's wife, who was spitting saliva everywhere. She looked away and said, Uncle Fong, let Lao Si and Juzi go down the mountain today. Find a place to rest in the prefectural city. I'll help you settle down in the prefectural city in 2 days. Don't go back to the village. Eldest young mistress, what do you mean? Fong frowned and said, Aren't they just a few scums? If one comes, Fong will kill one. If two come, I'll kill both. What's there to be afraid of? Sister, As soon as Fong finished speaking, a white figure dashed over from afar. Lu Rui's pretty face was covered in frost, and her body emitted a faint murderous intent. Rui, you say, how did you provoke these people? After a while, the Lu family members who learned the whole thing from Lao Si's wife all gathered in the small courtyard. A middle-aged man opened his mouth and sighed. His voice was full of resentment. What should we do? How can we fight against those heroes of the underworld? Rui, you've brought disaster upon us. Another middle-aged woman looked at Lu Rui and said with a pale face, Rui had captured a lot of Lulin village tyrants and handed them over to the government. But she had also offended those people. The Willow Leaf village would not have peace in the future. Their peaceful life for dozens of years naturally could not continue. Of course, although they complained, no one dared to say a few harsh words. After all, they knew the temperament of the two sisters. If they really got serious, none of them would be able to stop them. We can't fight against those people. I'm afraid we can't live in the village anymore. A man sighed. Everyone agreed. This was also the result of their discussion just now. Although they were born and grew up here, nothing was more important than their own lives. Those people's target was only Rui. If they left the village, they would not go so far as to let them go. Moreover, they didn't feel anything before. But since the candied Ha's business became profitable, their lives became comfortable. They gradually felt that living in the village was really inconvenient. Many of them had long thought of moving out. This incident was just a prelude. With their current net worth, they could live comfortably anywhere they wanted. They could find a new place to start their candied Ha's business, and they wouldn't have to pay the joining fee anymore. Wouldn't that be much better than their current lives? But they would not be willing to leave like this. A woman pushed the old man who was lying on a rocking chair in the courtyard and said, "Second uncle, say something." Ah. The old man who was napping was shaken awake by her. His eyes were half open and he said, "What did you say?" "Second uncle, you're an elder. You should also say your opinion on this matter." The woman said again, "Ah." A confused look appeared on the old man's face. He said, "You want me to eat?" "No, I don't want to eat. I just ate at third brother's house." After saying that, he turned over in the rocking chair and changed into a more comfortable position. He continued to nap. Just as the woman was about to speak, a voice was heard. Lu Rui looked at them and said, "This matter, Rui has indeed caused trouble for everyone. If any uncle wants to leave, as long as you let me know, you can get 10 taels of silver from me as a settlement fee." The people of the Lu family smiled. They had been waiting for this for a long time. This is so embarrassing. Fourth aunt, who had just reprimanded her, smiled. "In that case, thank you, Rui. Count me in. We were also forced to do this. I hope Rui won't blame us." Everyone spoke up one after another. Every family who wanted to leave received 10 taels of silver, and happily went back to pack up their belongings, planning to leave as soon as possible. 10 taels of silver as a settlement fee was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for them. It was enough for them to settle anywhere outside the prefectural city. Lu Rui's expression was cold as she looked at everything coldly. Lu Rui, on the other hand, looked at them with a smile. From today onwards, she really had nothing to do with these nominal uncles. Chapter 229. Li urged the worker to speed up the whole way, and they arrived at the foot of Green Willow Mountain in half the usual time. Without any delay, they arrived at the stronghold without any incident. Before they entered the stronghold, a few people walked towards them. Li easily recognized that it was 7th Uncle Lu's family. When they first wanted to enter the candied hawthorn business, he was one of the first to speak up. At this moment, this family was full of bags of various sizes, and even the two brats were no exception. When they saw Li at the entrance of the stronghold, 7th Uncle Lu and his wife froze for a moment. The expressions on their faces became strange. They didn't greet him, and walked straight past Li. The two brats stopped in their tracks and raised their heads to look at him. They called out in a low voice, mister, and turned to chase after their parents. Li stood where he was and looked into the stronghold. A few blurry figures carrying luggage walked towards him. Among these people, there were members of the Lu clan, and there were also ordinary villagers. The way they looked at him could be described as strange. More people brushed past him without saying a word. Occasionally, some people would come up to him and clasp their hands in thanks. For those villagers who didn't even have land, 10 taels of silver was enough for their entire family to spend for 2 years if they were frugal. Although Rui was only the head of the stronghold in name, and they had never acknowledged her in their hearts from this point, it could be seen that she treated them well. These people didn't hold any resentment in their hearts, but they were more or less reluctant to leave the place where they had lived for so long. He didn't know if it was Li Yi's imagination, but when he walked through the stronghold, he felt that it was much more spacious than before. It wasn't until he reached the front door of his house that he heard a rough voice coming from inside. "Eldest miss, what are you saying? I'm not leaving. I won't leave no matter what. I've lived for so long. How can I be afraid of these little thieves?" This was Fang's voice. Another voice followed. "Hee hee, young miss. We all know where the food you gave us for the past 2 years came from. If we leave now, are we still human?" After this voice was heard, several voices in the courtyard immediately echoed it. Bullsh *T. Do you really think we're pushovers? We'll listen to Fang this time. We won't leave. When Li Yi pushed the door open and walked in, everyone turned to look at him. Lu Rui was stunned. The next moment, she quickly walked over and asked, "Husband, why are you back?" Li Yi looked at her and said, "Everyone, follow me back to the prefectural city. No matter how bold they are, they won't dare to act wildly in the city." There were more than 1,000 guards in the prefectural city. As long as those people appeared in large numbers, the government would not ignore them. If those people dared to make a move in the prefectural city, they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. But here, they did not have to worry so much. "Husband, you know all about it?" Lu Rui looked at him and asked. Li looked at her. Was she planning to hide such a big thing from him? Lu Rui smiled and said, "What will come will come. Don't worry, husband. Actually, I'm very skilled in martial arts. Those people are nothing to be afraid of." Lu Rui knew better than anyone else about the methods of the people in the forest. If she did not teach them an unforgettable lesson, she was afraid that there would be endless trouble in the future. She could be a thief for 1,000 days, but she could not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Although she was not afraid of them, it was hard to guarantee that they would not attack from other areas. She turned around and pointed at a few people, including Fang, and said, "Uncle Fang, you go back to the city with the son-in-law first. I'm enough here." No. Although Rui was skilled in martial arts, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Wu said that there were dozens of them. Li could not let her stay here no matter what. However, just as he was about to object, he suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck. In the next moment, dizziness and darkness came over him. "Husband, I'm sorry." He saw Lu Rui take back her hand and hold him up. She looked at him apologetically, opened her mouth, and then lost consciousness. "Uncle Fang, I'll leave the son-in-law to you." Looking at first Miss, and then at the fainted son-in-law, Fang finally nodded helplessly. When Li Yi woke up, he felt that the whole world was shaking. He opened his eyes, and the ground below him was moving backward rapidly. This posture was very familiar, and the feeling was very familiar. The horse under him was even more familiar. "Stop!" Li Yi shouted. Fang, who was in front of him, pulled the reins, and the horse gradually stopped. Fang kindly reminded him, "Son-in-law, don't think about going back. First Miss will knock you out again. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to wake up the second time." Fang's words were very reasonable. Although she had a gentle temperament, it was not easy to change her mind once she had decided on something. At least, Li Yi could not change her mind. He would settle the score with her after this matter was over. The most important thing was how to get through the current crisis. Li Yi sat up straight on the horse and urged, "Go to the prefectural city." After entering the prefectural city, Li Yi did not return to Rui workshop. Instead, He and Fong went straight in the direction of Prince Ning's mansion. Now he could only rely on Li Xian's power. The bailiffs and bailiffs of the county government were not enough in front of those people. The guards of Prince Ning's mansion were all skilled, and there were many of them. If he could borrow some, it would be a great hindrance to those people. Young master, please wait here for a moment. I will immediately go and inform the crown prince. The servants of Prince Ning's mansion had a very good memory. Last time at the Wang Fei's birthday banquet, housekeeper Wang was very polite to this young master. Of course, he didn't dare to slight him now. He politely had Li Yi wait here and quickly ran in. Son-in-law, is that pretty boy really the young prince? Fong had long known the identity of Li Xian, but he still couldn't connect that unreliable pretty boy with the crown prince of Prince Ning. That's right. Li Yi nodded his head. After receiving confirmation from Li Yi, Fong's worried heart finally relaxed. He didn't know how strong the power of the Prince Ning's mansion was, but the guards that he was familiar with were not just for show. If there were a few more of these people, he would have more confidence in dealing with the motley crowd. Apologies, the young prince is not here. The servant went in quickly and came out quickly. He spoke apologetically to Li Yi. Not here. Li Yi furrowed his brow and said, Please help me inform the crown prince that I want to see the crown prince. Li Yi had never interacted with Prince Ning before. If he hadn't encountered a situation like today, he probably wouldn't have gone to see the crown prince of his own accord. But at this moment he couldn't care so much. The servant still had a smile on his face and said, Young master, my apologies, but the crown prince is also not in the fu. The expression on Li Yi's face froze, and he seemed to understand something. He turned to look at Fong and said, Let's go. Go where? Fong was puzzled. He hadn't even seen the person he was supposed to see. Why was the son-in-law leaving? The medicine shop. Why are we going to the medicine shop? Fong was even more puzzled. To buy some arsenic. If we can't beat them, to avoid being humiliated, it's better to take some medicine and commit suicide. Seeing Li Yi and old Fong's silhouettes disappear from afar, the servant looked around and returned to the prince's mansion. He passed through several long corridors and knocked on the door of a certain building. After getting a response, he pushed the door open and walked in. Your Highness, they have been sent away. I know. You can leave now. A voice came from the table in the middle of the room. The servant bowed respectfully and slowly retreated. Both His Majesty and the princess seem to value this boy. The crown prince also has a close relationship with him. Your Highness, why? An old voice came from the corner. Before the words could finish, Prince Ning waved his hand and interrupted. Thinking of Li Xian's recent changes, Prince Ning frowned and said, He does have some crooked talents, but he can't show them in public. If Xianer hangs out with him all day, I'm afraid the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. After Prince Ning spoke, there was no more sound from the corner of the study. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.